Selectmen first. I don't think there's any questions there. The detail is on page 1.
Advertising went up by $100 and everything else is level.
It's the same. Anybody have any questions?
I'm in the wrong spot.
We usually vote after you leave, so we don't take up your time. If that's good with you.
Whatever you want to do, we're here to serve you.
Yes, of course you are. Town Administrator. Might as well go right to him next. What page are you?
They should go in order.
Page 2. If you go to the detail in the back, it's page 2.
Oh, they do go in order. I don't know if I ever realized that. Okay,
There's no changes in that budget.
so could you refresh our memories on what the merit-based pay is based on? I know it's a certain percentage of, what, all the department heads?
The Merit Pay program was something that was established several years ago to provide some incentives to, performance-based incentives to department heads for achieving certain goals and objectives during the previous year. The way it's structured is that the department heads are evaluated on an annual basis, usually in November or December, and based upon their achievement of goals, they could receive a one-time stipend or bonus payment up to 2% of their annual salary.
So you take the department head salaries, how do you budget that? Do you
I
take
take the
all the
department head
total
salaries
and
and I
multiply
take-
by 2%?
2%, and that would be the maximum.
Okay,
Doesn't usually get to the maximum, or hasn't
Right.
recently, so.
that's 2%, okay.
So I understood that program came about because many of those were just getting their annual adjustments and not moving up in their pay grades, and this is a way to help some of those employees also move.
No, I don't think that
Comparable
was the case. It was never meant to help any of the department heads move up in the pay grade. That certainly was not happening. We did correct
Well, they
that.
certainly were to move up, but in lieu of moving up because of the way that the system seemed to be working.
No, I don't
No,
think,
this
I
is
don't
just
think so.
department heads. This is, it's just a,
Oh, well, maybe Barbara, because I wasn't
So-
here when that
Yeah, so
started.
what it was is, back when Jim Malloy was the town administrator, he had some flexibility with, he would have a pool of money for increases for department heads. And so he would award those increases based on,
Merit.
well, yeah, I guess merit is the right word. And so there was some criticism of that program, the way he was doing it, because, you know, there could be the potential for favoritism. So if, you know, if he had a pool of money, and I'm just making these numbers up, but he could give someone a 5% increase if they really excelled, and then someone else might get a 2%. And so there was question as to whether that program was fair. And so that was eliminated. And then this putting this merit in based on having a list of goals that you had to achieve, and then if you achieved all your goals, you would get the 2%. If you didn't achieve all your goals, you would get less than 2%. Then it kind of evolved from there, where when Sean Zahowski was here, he changed it so it became goal-based and performance-based, so a small percentage of the 2% is based on job performance, and then the rest is on goal performance, or goals, you know.
And
So
then, when I got here, I changed it again. When I got here, I changed it again to make it more evenly split between performance and goals setting.
So with that background and your new proposal for department head salaries, the steps.
Well, this would be the second year of it, but yes, yeah.
So is that, how does this merit pool work into that? Because, you know, based on your memo and some of those, you know, some of these adjustments to keep moving up, you know, are pretty high increases, and that doesn't include a 2% piece on top of that, to the extent that a department head excels and
Yeah.
qualifies for that. So how do the two play together here?
Well, when we reformed the system last year, we didn't propose doing anything differently with the 2% merit pay. But I'm open to having a conversation with you folks and the Board of Selectmen on that, and the Personnel Committee, yeah. When we discussed it with the Personnel Committee and the Selectmen and the Finance Committee last year, that wasn't actually part of the discussion, but I don't see why it couldn't be.
The other thing to keep in mind is that the merit does not get added into the salary base. It's just.
A one-time,
It's a
Yep,
one-time.
understood.
Yeah, okay.
You gotta earn it every year.
And I
Right,
had,
it doesn't increase your salary moving
base
forward.
salary.
So it's,
and I don't want to delay, but I had some questions, just to educate myself a little bit on this, because I read your memo, I had not seen it before, and I saw the 17 and 18, the graph, the chart you have set up there, and the matrix, it had entry level, it had the steps, and then it had the maximum. And I understand that, but my first question is that typical in the municipal
Oh,
employment
yes.
world for, I know it is in the world I come from, for hourly and non-exempt, but once we got to the exempt managerial level, we didn't have that. We had job descriptions and, a range, and it got adjusted every year based on market surveys that I did with several organizations. So this is typical, most towns or cities have this grid that you prepared for our management
yeah.
level people?
Oh,
That was my
definitely.
first question,
Yeah.
okay. And then I looked at that, and I see the steps are based on longevity. Every year, if you're still here, you move to the next step. And you also get the COLA of 2.5%. That gets added on top.
whatever the COLA is. It
Whatever
could
it
be
is.
0, it could be,
Okay, because
Whatever.
I was trying to do the arithmetic to figure it out. And one thing that puzzled me is I looked at the step and I had to back out, trying to figure out what it was last year so I could get to the number on the grid, if you
it is a
know.
little confusing. That's why I gave some examples in my memo to,
Well, what confused me, and it's not a huge sum of money, but what confused me is we apply the 2.5% COLA adjustment to the new rate after we arrive at the new rate. And if you're going to put a COLA on an existing salary, if, for instance, you want to adjust the COLA for what people are making this year, because next year it's worth less, correct? So you take 2% of that and you add it to the new salary for next year. At least, that's the logic I was trying to follow. And what we do is, we take the new salary and we add 2% on top of that, which is compounding the increase.
no, we take the old salary, so if you take the fiscal 18 grid, and then compare it to the 19, the difference in each of those columns, so step 1, 2, 3, goes up exactly 2.5%, because that's what,
What I did was, I took the number for here and compared it to last year. I divided this one by 1.025, and it gave me last year's, the increase number, according to this grid. So what basically was happening was we were taking, say we take 2017 and you move up to the 2018 rate,
yeah.
right on the grid, and then this new number is increased by 2.5% to get the salary for the upcoming year. That's how the arithmetic worked. That's why I had trouble backing into it.
For somebody who who remains in the same step.
They're,
Right, so-
that
so-
step
so
would
his-
go up 2.5%.
I think the point of that memo was, if you're in step 5, and, you get the 2.5% of this year, you're still in step 5, you haven't moved in your grade, the maximum is moved on you, so you would move, you get to 2.5%, move to step 6, so you're getting 2.5 plus whatever the differential
You're
between
not- I don't
steps
think
5
you're
and
hearing
6.
me. What I'm saying is I'm taking the existing rate, moving it up one step to the next rate,
Yeah.
then adding 2.5%, and that's the number that's in the book.
do you have the
I-
thing
I
that I
can see that.
gave to you with you?
Yeah, that makes sense, so you're still,
I have the grid. I have it here somewhere. I'm just
have it right
philosophically, I'm just saying it. The one I found it on was,
Do you have the
You
grid?
want, do you mean this one,
No,
or this one?
yes, in your left hand, in your right hand.
and I,
See where it says-
again, the point I'm trying to make is, a cost of living increase is supposed to take you from where you were and make up the difference of what you needed to remain whole in your purchasing power.
That's correct.
But if you get a 5% increase, and you go from 100 to 105, and then you add the 2.5% to the 105, that's different than taking.
No, we only give one general wage adjustment a year. So you're looking, if you have the one that has fiscal 2017 at the top and it's all the
I got
department
notes on
heads,
Oh, you can look at this, just don't
mine.
write
I have it right here.
You got it?
Yeah, I have it.
Do you have it, Joni?
yeah, that's all.
on this, I don't have it.
But I don't want to belabor this. Maybe,
No, I don't have
Maybe I
extra.
do.
Is that clear?
No, I don't think I do.
so on this grid for the town planner, the rate went from 84,447, and the next step is 87,240. And then if I add 2.5% to the new step, this is for year 18, it comes out to what the actual salary was. So the step increase is given,
Okay,
and then the 2.5%
I'm sorry,
is
go back to
added.
your
So if
example.
you do 87,400.
Go back to 2018 grid, go to town planner, and go to step 7. And you see where it's 84,447?
Yes,
And see where it's 87,240?
yes.
The salary she got was 87,240 plus 2.5%. It wasn't 2.5% of 84,447 plus 87,240. It was 87,240 times 1.025. What I'm saying is, we're adding the cost of living to the future pay.
Yeah.
When, and it's not a significant amount of dollars, it's probably less than $100 in every case.
What we're doing is we're taking, so if you take the fiscal 17 figure, all of those figures in the minimum to the maximum have all been increased by 2.5% when you go down to the next year.
So look at, if you go to step 7 for town planner above,
Yeah.
it looks like it's 81,987.
Yeah.
And then it was a 3% raise last year.
Yeah, this is between 17 and 18, and there was a 3% raise last year. So between
So 3% on 81,967, or
987.
987, sorry, is 84,447.
So is the difference that, Jim, you're looking at a fiscal year 2018 step 7 salary rate, and the book that we're looking at for is a fiscal year 2019, so the difference, the 2.5% difference from what you're seeing in the line item for this year, the budget we're reviewing versus on a chart, just reflects that we're off by a fiscal year that hasn't been increased?
Case in point, and I should have taken better notes. I just brought it up in general sense, because
This is the, Mary Blanchard's.
divided by 1.025. So if I take 89421, which is the upcoming salary for the town planner, 89421, and I divide it by 1.025, I come out to 87,240. And if I go to the grid, the salary there is 87,240.
Right.
She makes,
So the,
she makes 84,447 right now. So you have to go to the fiscal, so she's a step 7, wait a
Right.
minute, right?
so she's gonna go to 87,240?
No, she's
Oh.
gonna go, because the whole grid changes, so the 84,447 for next year becomes 84,447 times 2.5%. And then she goes to step 8.
It's 89.
So you-
So the 84,447 goes up 2% to increase the step?
All the steps go
All the
up.
steps go
They
up.
all go up 2.5%, then
Then you move
it
up
goes
your
to the
step.
next year.
Then you
Okay.
Then you move up to your step.
I was having a heck of a time trying to figure out what the sequence
No
was.
worry, this is not for the faint of heart. You can, feel free to call if you have a question.
Now I'll
like that.
remember it, but I'm trying to say, this is driving me, because I couldn't get the arithmetic to work.
No worries,
Okay,
no worries.
thank you.
Yeah, so if I go back to Jim's earlier question, I'm used to for this level of employee, the non-hourly employees, having a min and a max, and people moving up in that based on, some COLA adjustments plus performance reviews that allow them to move up a little bit in the grade each year as they meet or exceed expectations. You get an overall salary increase budget that you then allocate across all your department heads based on performances and so forth, and however you decide to roll that out. That's what I thought your merit increase was, although I realize you didn't add it into your base pay, it was just a one-time thing. now you're sort of shifting to the, if you did well, you're going to bump up to your next grade, step in your grade. And there's some pretty big adjustments in there, so I'm wondering, how that merit pool adds additional dollars and there really plays in. And in your program here, I guess when you're here a long time and you hit the maximum grade, whether it's 9 or 10, I don't remember what the chart was, at that point, you sort of maxed out. And, if you perform well, you get your cost of living adjustment. There really is no mechanism to continue to.
No, and that's a problem
beyond
that exists in all of these pay systems. So the reason why you get paid in steps is, we say that the value, we'll just pick the position, we'll pick DPW director at random, because that's number one on the list here. DPW director, we're saying the value of that position in fiscal year 18 is $107,562. That's what we're saying the value is. But the municipality won't hire at that level. What we'll say to the DPW director is, we're hiring you, let's just say for argument's sake, at step 1. And you got to prove yourself to the town of Sturbridge. And with years on the job, good evaluations, performance standards being met, next year we're going to give you a step up to closer to the maximum. So that after 10 years, I, as the employer, should be able to say to our employees that you have, in the last 10 years, presuming that you've performed adequately or above adequately, you have exceeded, you have seen everything that you need to do, and you've learned everything that you possibly could have to learn in the 10 years that you've been here. You deserve to be paid the fair wage for that position, which means we would pay you at $107,562. The reality of it in Sturbridge was, and this is what I attempted to change with the system last year, was that was never happening. We'll use the DPW director as an example. He's been working for the town for 24 or so years. I don't know Greg all that well. I've only known him for 3 years. But my guess is that he's seen it all in Sturbridge in his 24 years as the DPW director. I don't think that he has anything more to learn to prove his worth to the town after 24 years. So presumably, he should be being paid the maximum in that pay grade at this point in his career. By the way, I just want you all to know, I never established the minimums and maximums for any of these pay scales. These pay scales preceded my arrival here in Sturbridge. The Personnel Committee has been working diligently over decades, working to establish fair minimums and maximums for all the positions in the town. Where it was broken here in Sturbridge is there was no way for somebody who, after years of working for the town, was able to move from the minimum in their pay grade to the maximum without going to some other means to do so. Meaning that you get fed up, I'm presuming, I don't know if this has ever happened, but you get fed up and you go to the selectmen and you say, I demand a blank, blank, blank raise, or I'm going to go move to the town next door where I'm going to be making 20 or 30 or 40 grand more than what I'm making right now. And then the town would say, well, we can't lose Bob, he's great, we got to make some crazy adjustment in his salary in order to keep him. And that's probably what has happened for some positions over the years. So there's some positions, I don't mean, I know I can talk too much, but there are some positions where you had some people who've worked, 5, 6 years, and were still at what the minimum salary for that pay grade was. 5 or 6 years, and they're still getting paid the minimum, which means that somebody who comes in to replace that person ends up getting the same salary as the person who left.
So those steps weren't automatic every year?
They didn't have steps at all.
No, they didn't
Okay.
exist.
Now, here's my other question then is, how confident are you that the numbers we have now are competitive with other communities?
I would say this.
Because we got a lot of good people working for us, and I would hate to think that we're underpaying them
Well,
grossly.
I don't want to say that. Here's what I would say. I would say that there are some jobs where I feel very confident we would have a very hard time finding a very good qualified person to fill that vacancy at step one, all right? Some of the jobs you've heard about in the last several years, town accountant is one. Finding a municipality, any municipality trying to find a town accountant at $50,000 a year in the market that we're living in is going to be challenging. There are other positions on here that I think are more in line with what the pay scale is. The Personnel Committee and I have talked about this, and we are about to be undergo, starting this fiscal year, a complete retooling of all the pay scales. We're going to be looking at these job descriptions, and we're going to be looking at pay scales with our comparative communities, okay?
Does the state have anything that they have a tool in any way that they
There are
accumulate the
people who do
information?
it as a consultant, on a consultant basis.
Well, yeah.
UMass Collins Center also performs these types of duties. It's really what are your benchmark communities? They do a survey. They plump in our data, and that third-party entity comes out and spits out and says, all right, it looks like your DPW director is within a 20% margin. We think that your scales are fair. The finance director position is undervalued at the current level. We think that you need to adjust the scales by 8% on minimum, maximum, and.
So they'll give you that information?
Sure.
Min, max, the median,
It's
all
called doing
that?
a wage and compensation study, and we can
I've done many
arrange
of
to
them.
have one. One of the selectmen has been talking about doing one for the last several months now.
I did
I
them, I
would
did
say
them
this-
every year for the last 25 years before I retired, with different organizations. We did them every year with 3 manufacturing organizations to make sure that our salaries were statewide.
What I
So I
do-
know what it's.
What I do is to be fair to people, because look, we just lost we had a retiree as our conservation agent this past year.
Yeah.
Brought in a brand-new conservation agent, never worked in this profession before, has experience in the field, but not as a conservation agent. I started her at step one. The person who left, who had been here for 5 years, was at step one, or maybe he was step two. I think this current year, he was
And
at.
how many years' experience before he arrived here?
Oh, he had,
He was from other, he had worked.
he had other,
And we brought him in at the low end of the scale.
do you bring people in above step one?
I was just gonna go there.
If it's
So,
warranted?
If I find somebody,
Certainly, the teachers do.
Bring him in at the market.
you gotta be careful, because then you're bringing in people, you have to be careful here, because you have to be fair both externally
And
and
internally.
internally, right? So having somebody at the same grade who's been here for 5 years and at step one, if I brought in another employee at the same grade and brought them in at, let's just say, step three, how fair is that to the person who's been
I
toiling
understand.
for
Somebody's
the
already
town
dug the
for
hole that you're
years?
in, and you're stuck in that hole.
Not fair. What I do, though, is I look at new hires and I say, steps 1, 2, or 3. If you come in with an excessive amount of experience, comparable experience, or education, or combination of both.
Sure.
I give myself the freedom to hire somebody at step 1, step 2 if they have a little bit more than just basic level, step 3 if they're very qualified. So far, that has worked in my tenure here, hiring some department heads. It doesn't work for all positions. I'll tell you the ones that it won't work for. More than likely, town administrator, police chief, fire chief, finance director, sometimes DPW director. Those higher echelon positions within the town administration, it's oftentimes difficult. When I have to, if poor Barbara, we'll pick on Barbara, she's next to me. If poor Barbara were to leave tomorrow, do I think that I could find a qualified finance director for $73,000 a year? Yes, but would I find somebody who has, comparable municipal experience to come in at $73,000? I think it would be difficult. I think it would be more than difficult to find somebody with those
Close to impossible.
qualifications. So the challenge that I have is, well, I have to make sure Barbara's happy, but aside from that for a moment, what I have to do is when these positions become, up for review, we need to look at those pay scales really carefully to make sure that we're capable, that not only the maximum in the pay scale is comparable, but that the minimum and the midpoints are comparable as well. And that's the way you do the study. Minimum, maximum, midpoint, and you compare them for all communities in your benchmark, and then you find out where in the range that we are. I think that in some cases, I think that we're good, I think that for a lot of our, non-department head positions, I think that we are actually competitive. I think that in some areas, I think that we have to have better definitions as to what those job responsibilities are, because I think that there are some similar type jobs that are not similar, that are treated as similar. And I think that we're going to be, I know Mike is your representative on the Personnel Committee, and we have an ambitious schedule to go to this year. This year, we're doing all administrative assistants here for the town of Sturbridge and comparing them internally and externally with one set of eyes. It's an ambitious goal that we have, but it's an important one. It's one that we set when we met at the end of 2017. I don't want to spend all the time talking about this,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to answer any more questions you have.
Just
Okay.
had a quick one.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you do the reviews on the anniversary of the date of hire annually?
I do the department head reviews at the end of the calendar year. I do department head 6 months reviews upon their 6-month anniversary. And then I do annual reviews for all department heads, starting around Thanksgiving, wrapping them up before Christmas.
Thank you.
8 years. I do these surveys every year for the banks.
My administrative assistant, I will do on her anniversary date. And any other employees that I directly oversee, for example, the Economic Development Tourism Coordinator, I do him on his anniversary date.
Barbara, I was just wondering, how many, what is the number of department heads that we have?
1, 2,
Oh, is this it here, if I count these?
I don't know what you're looking at.
Your grid.
Your grid.
You're great.
It starts with
5,
DPW
6, 7, 8,
Yes.
9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
And
So
fire
there's
chief isn't
13.
either, I don't think.
Yeah, so there are certain department heads that are now going to be
Okay.
contractual employees, so the steps are not going to apply to them. You've got, your town
Oh,
accountant, your
it's on
town
this one,
assessor,
though.
finance
It's on
director, town
They're on here.
clerk, conservation
I just
agent,
counted 13. You're
town
saying?
planner, yep.
The fire chief and the police chief are not on there, on that list you were just looking at.
Right, but you said they're contractual, so would that come from a different?
Well,
Just
you
the
asked
last
how many
page.
departments. This one is?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's-
16.
I guess there's 15.
Yep, so there's
Or 16
15.
if you count Leon.
And then my next question was, who's in the pool? So it's really the 13 that's in the pool.
You mean for the
That's in
merit?
this merit pool.
It would be the 16.
All
So,
without, no, not the town administrator. Oh, yeah, the town
so
administrator.
this, so
Yeah, I'm
this
sorry.
merit-based pay incentive item is for 15 department heads.
16.
Yes,
16?
yes,
If we include, yes, because I'm saying, do you want to include Leon?
Well, whoever gets it.
yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's 16 on here, on this
So
list.
16 department heads get that merit.
Yes.
What, now, before, we used to see the grid as to who got what.
I can share
How
that with
many
you.
of them, I'm just curious to know, how many of them actually get the full 2.5%?
Oh, it's 2%.
Or 2%, sorry.
I don't think we've ever shared with you how much they get. I've shared with you the grid of the full, what the full 2% is.
Yep.
For the people, but if someone got 1%, we don't share that with you.
I think you're right, but we did know that there were, like, I think 2 that actually got the full 2%. I'm just curious to know,
Are you
out of,
asking how much of the, how much of the pool is actually spent?
yes, but yes.
Well, this
but I
year, we're
also
going to
would
be
like to
spending
know-
quite a bit less, because there's some department heads who get zero, who have gotten zero this year.
That's what I'm getting at, what is the distribution? Do you anticipate many getting 2%? Like, what is,
I
what do
can-
you anticipate?
I have to answer that question. I can answer what happened in 2017, because I'm the one who develops that that chart. I'm the one who does the evaluations. There's some department heads who get 0. There are some department heads who've gotten 2%. It depends on how long, if somebody is a new department head and started in October, that person doesn't get a merit pay increase at the end of the calendar year.
Well, honestly, I trust that you guys are doing this with your annual reviews and stuff, because to me, I'm looking at this as, you know, you exceed your goals, you're eligible to get 2% of this, you know, one-time payoff. That's how I see it. And I would trust you to say, you know, you're deserving, you're not so deserving, kind of.
I would say that not everybody gets 2%, if that's your
So
question.
that's kind of what I'm getting at, because I do remember a few years ago when we did go through this before, I think only one department head got the full 2%, and everybody else got something in between. And I was just curious to know, maybe it was 2, I don't know, but.
I'm a more stingy, I don't know if Barbara was going
Well-
to say this or not, but I'm pretty stingy when it comes to that. I kind of, I see a difference between moving up a step and giving a performance bonus. I think that there are some department heads that sometimes if they aren't able to achieve a goal and it's not necessarily their fault. For example, I don't know, I'll make up an example. We want you to implement the provisions of this law which we're expecting to come into effect this upcoming year, and that law is delayed for whatever reason, and that department head wasn't able to do that because of something out of their control. They weren't able to achieve that goal. Then I wouldn't necessarily count that against them. I might put more value on the goal, on the other goals that they have. So when I first arrived, the merit pay system, things were kind of treated all kind of equally, and there were certain things that I felt were unfair. So I reformed that system by making it also performance-based in general. Like if you're a great person, you do a great job, but for whatever reason, you weren't able to write this policy or adopt this charter thing or do whatever it was that was on your goal, to get a 0% increase was also not fair. So I reformed it a little bit to kind of take a bigger, broader picture of the employee's performance during the year, not just 5 things that were established as a goal that we want you to do.
How do we arrive at the amount that's in that pool?
It's a mathematical percentage of all the department head salaries
Take those
times
salaries times
0.002.
And that was my next question.
2% of
is
all
it-
those salaries is only $23,000?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I add up all those
It's not a lot of money, I know.
department head salaries,
It's just the department heads,
yeah,
those
just the department head,
16.
the 16 people. So if I were to take that number, Barbara, in the town administrator column and take 2%, I'd come up.
So I guess if your question was, I think what you're trying to get at, does everybody get 2%? You know, is it just an automatic? No. There's a lot, like he said, there's a lot of times where people get 2. There's a lot of times where people get slightly less than 2, and there's slightly more that get, you know, there's some that get, you know.
For example, this past year, we had one department head that started in July. And we did but she had been working as an interim prior to.
That's the
When
left.
she was appointed to her position, several goals on a 6-month basis were established, and she was told that the maximum she would be able to get would be 1%, because she was only here working, she didn't get as many goals. She was evaluated on a 6-month performance on a limited number of goals, with the understanding that you would get a maximum of 1% that year. And I thought that was fair. I don't think that they should have gotten a 2%.
No, I think, to Barbara's point, you know, 2% merit-based.
Yeah.
Merit-based says it all.
Yes.
So it's not an automatic that everybody's going to get a second check for, you know, whatever, 2%.
And I'll just make an observation. For somebody to get 2% out of this kind of a small pool, they're doing their job because they want to do their job. They're not doing it for the money, because that's not a lot of money. That's for a bonus, that's not a lot of money. That's not an incentive. That's just there because someone's motivated to do their job, and, oh, by
This
the way,
isn't
you're gonna
private
get.
industry, you know.
It's not a lot of money, John.
And while we call it,
I would disagree just slightly. I think that this program, not my creation, but I inherited it, I think is relatively innovative.
It's over $1 million a ton.
I think that when I came here, I was a little surprised to hear about this, and I do think it is a little bit forward-thinking. It's not a gigantic amount of money, to be fair, but it is something that is a reminder that, yeah, you're doing a good job, or maybe you need to be doing a better job in certain areas, and you're going to get that feedback in the evaluation process. But I think it's a nice, friendly reminder that, you know, we appreciate the work that you do, and we can throw you something at the
And
end.
I understand that 2% max is a control, but, you know, then you have people that really, I know in your heart, you'd love to do more for them because they really carried the water for you and did a great job, but you're capped by 2%. And,
Yeah.
you know, that
I think it's
can
more
be a
than,
frustrating
I
thing.
think it's more than fair. I think it's more.
Okay.
And I guess I trip up on this plan because the way you started it, it's, to me, it feels like we had a set of salary ranges. You know, we go for the typical COLA every year for employees, and this was a merit pool, kind of like the merit pool I get for employees reporting to me. You know, you have to grade them and allocate not only just the COLA, but a little bit of extra money to let those employees who are performing move up in their salary grades each year, not just get the COLA and just keep going with that.
That's not what happened. That's not the way it was structured, just so that you know.
And now it's, with the steps and grades you have, if you're one of those department heads and you're performing and meeting expectations, you bump up your grade, so you get the COLA plus an extra increase for having done this. And yet we have this merit pool, which the word bonus keeps coming tied to that. There's additional funds for that. And I just am not aware of any other municipal employees that I in other towns that I've talked to have that bonus type program in it. Are all struggling with the what are the COLA adjustments and how much incremental can I get?
Like I said,
in
I'm open
salaries
to having
to
a
bump
further
up?
conversation with you. I mean, there's a couple of different ways that we can look at it. One, we could leave it the same. Two, we could maybe reform the merit system again to make it solely based upon goal achievement, so that your performance brings you to your next step. Your goal achievement, which was what it was originally intended for in the first place, is what provides the merit system. Or we do away with the merit system entirely. And if you do a performance-based evaluation for department heads, that the part of the reason you jump from step 1 to step 2 is simply on merit. I'm open to having a conversation with that. I know that we probably don't want to have all of that discussion here tonight, but
No, I don't think so.
That's what, I think some
We have a lot to
feedback
get
maybe
through.
from the personnel committee. I know you got
it's
selectmen will be reviewing this as well
It's
as.
on the agenda to
I knew
discuss
it was
with the
inevitable.
personnel committee at our meeting in April. So,
But for someone starting out who can look at this merit pool and say, this is something that'll be added to my base, and then the COLA applies to that, year after
the
year.
merit is never, I just want to reiterate, the merit pay was never and still is never added to the base of anyone's
So
salary.
it's
It was
paid out
always
annually.
just a one-time thing. I will point out, and it goes back to your point, in the past year, I've hired 2 people that fall onto that department head list, all right? Both of them were questionable whether or not they were even going to accept the position, but one of the things that put them, yeah, I think I might be taking a little bit of a pay cut by taking this as step 1, but the merit pay system was something that they said, I can make it work with that at the end of the calendar year. That was enough for them to say, you know, I know that they're not gonna bark up the tree and get me to hire them at step 4 or 5 or whatever, but knowing that that existed was something that helped seal the deal to get them to sign on the dotted line to becoming a town employee.
And it took a while, but I
2 employees.
I got why you pushed back on my comment before, that it wasn't added into the base, but maybe that would be an alternative way of using that merit, which is kind of like, here's your salary increase pool, and you have to allocate it among your employees, would be to use that merit pool to increase salary levels to let them move up versus,
That would
and
be
then
okay,
continue that
but
on as
just
well.
know, 2%, you would take you 30 years to get from the minimum to the maximum in your pay grade.
But that would be in addition to the COLA increases that you have across
I
the board.
understand. It would still probably take a long time. So, and I would also argue that those pay scales, and I said it in the memo, I'll just reiterate it publicly, the pay scales, there are inherent problems with the pay scales. You will note that some of the steps are wide and some of the steps are narrow. And that's not a function of something that we created, that's something that is inherent with the system. Those were the minimums and maximums that I inherited. Therefore, you'll see that some of the steps are large and some of them are small. In my opinion, there should be some uniformity, unless there's a specific position where that uniformity doesn't exist. It needs to be more wide or it needs to be more narrow, and that's open for discussion, but on its face, I can't answer you or if you had a question as to why those pay ranges are what they are.
And with the right survey data, that'll clarify it for a lot of people.
Right survey data
You
will
have to have it
clarify.
right this way, and you have to have it correct this
Yeah.
way, and every step in between. And that was always a challenge.
What I will tell you, and I can speak emphatically on this, all of those steps are correct. I know that for sure.
All right, I think
So,
we should move on.
Yeah, we need to move on. I guess the question is,
We probably
if
should
we're going to have
come
any
back-
other discussion, it would be helpful to have someone maybe from the Personnel Committee after Leon talks to them,
And Mike,
or
you're
Mike
done.
Mike can report back
He's
at
on.
another point as to, how the Personnel Committee views this approach and recommendations they have for these salary structures.
I think the rationale we developed last year, correct?
Yes.
But it didn't appear in this booklet,
Well,
the Personnel Committee note minutes that we usually have in this booklet. This booklet, the budget booklet usually has Personnel Committee minutes in it, but it's been missing the past year or two.
That's why, your document was a 2017 document. It's the first time I've seen it. And I've been on
I'm
this
not sure what you're talking about.
Well, we used to have a tab in here that had personnel.
I think it's been long, it's probably been like 6 or 7.
That's never been since I've been here.
No,
Really?
because I remember it, Barbara.
I think it went away when Sean was here.
So
Yeah, I don't
maybe
think
when
I
I left.
remember it.
Well, I've been on it.
I've never even heard of it. I've never heard
This is
of it.
his third budget, Suzanne was here a year, Sean was here, I think, 3 years, it's been longer than you think, but it hasn't been that long.
Yeah, I don't think it was in there when I've been
Would you
here.
want the Personnel Committee meeting minutes in the book? I have zero problem doing
No,
that.
no, I-
by the way.
No, it's less, actually, it's less, it's helpful for me in terms of explaining to other people what we actually did and the rationale. I can just point them to the notes from our meeting.
I have no problem doing that.
Charts, yeah.
I never even knew that they were part of the book, so.
Okay.
What I was thinking, I didn't realize when you say the minutes, but I do recall having the base charts and stuff before.
That's been a while, too.
But I remember it, and I've been here since the beginning of Sean's tenure.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's been, I don't think it's been 6 years, maybe it's been 3 years it hasn't been in the book, but it used to be a regular
You were a
tab in
couple
this
years
book.
after me, right?
And
Yeah, I came after
Hey,
you. I don't
I'm
remember it.
happy to provide those to you. It's public record. I'm happy to do it. I
Okay.
didn't know it was part of the book before, and it wasn't here when I was here, so.
Right.
All right, let's move on. Anything else on the town administrator budget? The rest looks actually
We're not
quite,
making good time, Madam Chair.
I know,
Now we will.
quite level funded. So anybody have any questions on TA budget? We've done the finance committee. Accountant. Let's see. Now, his registration fees went up because he's taking that class, right?
Right.
So that's really the only difference in his, actually, his office supplies went down, so otherwise, he's pretty much level funded.
I'm curious about why something like that will go down. Is that just because the budget wasn't exhausted this past year? So
It's been a few years, and so, yeah, and so we adjusted it based on what the actual spending patterns have been.
We're comfortable with the numbers.
I believe the next one is finance director.
it's assessor, isn't it?
We already did
We
that.
did the assessor.
We did that already.
Just one question, just looking at the two. Why doesn't the accountant have longevity?
Hasn't been here long.
He hasn't been here long enough.
To be here a certain amount of time?
Isn't it?
first?
5 years minimum.
We established a process for longevity. He hasn't been here long enough.
I mean, that budget looks pretty level funded.
Finance director's budget is essentially level funded, level services, I should say.
Now, town council, you went down, even though we had a reserve fund transfer to get it up this year, so are you anticipating it to go down
Well,
realistically?
God, I hope so. This past year was miserable with town council. We had a lot of really complicated issues, but we had major court cases this year that we had to deal with. Most of them, if not all of them, have been, I wouldn't say all of them, I would say that most of the more complicated ones have been resolved before the end of this fiscal year. So, yeah, it is lower than what you see. The fiscal year 2018 number, I believe, includes the transfer that we added.
Oh, it does? Oh, okay.
So,
Oh.
because I bet you, I don't remember what we actually went to town meeting for last year, but my guess it would be somewhere around, closer to the 72.5 number as opposed to the 140.
I think we added 6 for the town.
Right, so it would be at 80. So my request of 100 was, you know, I did come to you not once but twice in the last 2 years, so my frugal nature probably was the better of me. So I decided to actually move it up to 100,000.
Okay, well, now let me ask you another question, because I hang out at Housing Court a lot, and there's been some talk that building inspectors and Board of Health agents who generally go by themselves to Housing Court
I've heard that.
that will now need counsel.
That's not yet finalized yet.
Yeah, I understand it's not been finalized yet.
And the
but-
people locally are opposed to that, is also what I've heard. Bree,
Well, it's up to the Chief Justice of the Housing Court.
correct, it is.
Yes.
Yes, it is. But I've
So how would
heard,
that impact this?
well, theoretically, it could.
I mean, I must say, I don't see Sturbridge there a lot, but I see
No, we're
other
not.
towns there all the time.
We're not. I think we'll be okay.
Okay.
I did hear about that after I put that number in,
But, yeah.
but it's not causing me to jump up and down and raise it an extra 20 grand, so.
Is any of this, we still have any litigation pending or expect anything with the landfill in Southbridge with Casella?
Well, I can't speak to any specific case, but in that particular case, I would say I don't anticipate that any additional requests for funding will be coming forward. I would say within 12 months' time, I may actually be going to close out those accounts for whatever was not spent, if that helps you want to answer that question.
And those costs don't come out of this budget.
Those were separate line
Those were
items voted
separate.
as warrant articles.
I'm just concerned about that neighborhood we have that's affected allegedly.
Oh,
by
yes,
that.
I understand. But just so that you remember, and this is public record, we went for those funds to contest the expansion of the Casella landfill in Southbridge, and those plans have been withdrawn for further consideration.
Well, the people of Southbridge shot that down too. They didn't want it. They want them out.
Correct.
So it's,
So the need for litigation monies for that purpose
Yeah.
are less than what they were, what, a year and a half ago? But that's a good question.
Okay, next is information technology. You are proposing a new position.
We need, where is information technology?
Page 8,
Oh,
page
I
8
must-
in our detail.
Okay, I must have missed that page. Hold on for 1 second. My pages got stuck together. When I arrived here, I was told there were 2 major problems with the town of Sturbridge that I needed to fix right away. Well, I had many problems, but the 2 major problems were, we need somebody to oversee facilities, and we need somebody to oversee IT. And we have really struggled with IT in the last several years. I want to say publicly, we've been the beneficiary of a very inexpensive but appreciated service through Tantasqua. Essentially, what we've been doing is we've been using our friends at Tantasqua in the IT department to help us with our problems. problem that they've had in the last year that kind of exasperated in this past year was some of their longtime employees have moved on to greener pastures. And they've been behind the 8 ball. And of course, their number one priority is, we got to deal with the school stuff. They work for the schools. They don't work for the town.
Right.
So we've had a meeting of the mind, both with Tantascwa and with us, and I think their recommendations and our recommendation was that we need to bring somebody on that's going to be the town person. We're going to keep a little bit of money in there in case we need to bring Tantascwa in for some high-level things because of their longevity here in the town. So we have a little bit of money, I think it's $7,500, just in the event that we need to bring them back for a purpose over the next fiscal year. But we are looking to create what we are calling an IT specialist position, where they will work for the town to do all the things that we need. We have heavy IT needs at public safety that are going unmet. I won't say unmet, but maybe not met to the level that we need or the timing at which we need. Even simple tasks in our buildings, we're waiting some time to be able to get those things taken care of. We have lots of computer and IT issues, and our systems are becoming more technology-driven, not less. And things that are in my worry closet are things like cybersecurity, and what are we doing to prevent hacking and malware and those types of spamware things from attacking our systems. We've started to see not only in the Massachusetts municipalities, but worldwide instances of hackware, municipalities and other governmental entities really being shut down because of, foreign hackers or just crazy kids who like to cause trouble on their home computers. I'm thinking more of foreign countries.
Yeah.
But, so we need to be a little bit more proactive. This past year, I attended the MMA conference, and one of the seminars that I attended was on cybersecurity. And the speaker was quite firm, I guess, in his speech that municipalities need to be taking this seriously and to be proactive, not reactive in this, because being proactive might prevent hundreds of thousands of dollars of towns' monies being wasted on fixing things after the fact. So I haven't yet formally created the position. I haven't yet gone to the personnel committee creating a job description. Barbara and I worked with our colleagues over at Tantascwa to prepare some draft ideas for job descriptions. I've also outreached to some of my colleagues in the Commonwealth who have IT professionals to get sample job descriptions that I'm compiling for the Personnel Committee when I meet with them as well. We will have to have the position graded. We'll have to have the position evaluated by personnel. We're using this number as a placeholder because we think with our friends at Tantascwa, this is a fair number for what we would be looking for.
So this would be a full-time position?
We believe, yes, it would be a full-time position.
Have you considered using, say, a third party who
I
provides a
have.
remote
In fact,
access?
I actually had done that in the past in my previous job. There are pros and cons to that. Subbing it out, you're in sort of the same position as you were when you were working with Tantascwa. They'll get to it when they can get to it, all right? They have their other clients, they have their other jobs. So, do I feel that it could work? Perhaps, but I also think we have enough work here to keep somebody busy. Police, fire, our municipal offices. I think we have enough work here to keep somebody busy for at least the first 3 years. My approach would be, maybe we'll reevaluate it after the first 3 years to see if maybe we can do with either scaling back the position or maybe looking at subbing it out. But I think for the time being, I think the proper way of approaching this is looking at bringing on somebody to do this work.
Do you know how many end users and how many servers we have here that this person would be responsible for?
I don't know if I can answer that question right this minute, but I can give you that answer.
Just comment.
Yeah.
So, I was waiting for your question, Mike, that you asked every other department when we were on finance director, which is, so how are things going, and what do you need that you don't have? But that didn't happen, so.
I joked with him about it last night. I told him we would say that.
But let me just say, if anyone knows the demands of not having an in-house IT person, it pretty much all falls on me. My job has gotten more and more demanding. I work crazy hours. Something has to give. And this is not the only thing that needs to give, but this is a good first step. And, you know, the police department pretty much manages their IT needs, but there is on several occasions where I have to get involved. And fire department also, to some level, they do manage things, but I am the one keeping track of when computers need to be replaced. I'm the one dealing with when servers need to be upgraded. I'm the one that's getting emailed when the departments have an issue in their offices that need to be resolved. I have a list going right now of about 10 different IT projects that are ongoing that I just spoke to Greg Rosso about the other day to find out where they were in the queue. And I have already lived the third-party consultant role, and I was involved heavily then too. I need somebody that is in-house that I can pretty much just say, you know, if you go talk to the school department, I would guarantee you that Deb Boyd is not doing the things that I am doing regarding IT. She as a person, her questions to IT are probably, I need a budget, I need you to justify the budget that you're giving me as to what needs to be done. And that should be my role for IT, not what I'm doing. And believe me, I have learned a lot about IT over the past 25 years, just about, because it's been my role. And I think, you know, Leon and I will disagree on this because I know what happens daily. He hears about it when I get to the point where I'm like fed up, but I guarantee you that if he had to deal with, you know, what I'm dealing with on a daily basis, and believe me, it is daily. There's just, I don't even want to, you know, 3 years from now, I will feel the same way that we need an in-house person because, you know, we have a server at the public safety complex. We are, you know, we're rewiring the building because the building isn't wired adequately. If you look at this list, I mean, we have issues regarding changing over computers from Win 7 to Win 10 because we need upgrades to have software run that is getting upgraded. Let me just. The computer-
Windows 7 is like 2011.
What's that?
Windows 7 is like 7 or 8 years ago.
We have to do what we can do and how we can do it. We're doing things on a reactive
older than that.
basis. We're never doing
Right,
things
and
on
so-
proactively.
So that situation for and it's short money, $2,000. But the bottom line is, we've got notification that our software will not, we need to do this upgrade or our software is not gonna work. And I didn't bring up all my folders, so I don't remember specifically which, what it is, what's involved, but that has to do with, that's at the public safety complex. The public safety infrastructure upgrade, that was done in fiscal 2017. You know, even just going to our new phone system, I took the lead on that project. Transferring everything over, you know, coming up with the numbers, I worked with Leon on that, but
Our permitting software program, which is
you know,
going to be a massive undertaking.
There's huge amounts of things, and, you know, the computer replacement plan every year, you know, I'm the one that has the list of what's the age of the computers, what needs to replace. That's not, it's very time consuming. So we are beyond there for needing an in-house person. I think that there is so much that can be done, and I think that position will be needed into the future. I don't see us going back, because everything, I mean, the public safety complex, the technology there is more and more complicated. you know, you have to be specially trained to be able to do some of the repairs and the upgrades on some of their computers because of the sensitivity of the data they have there. We've put in systems for, you know, where, you know, all our data isn't sitting on one computer. It's, you know, it's transferring back and forth. We just upgraded the server here. We're still in the you know, it's been upgraded, we're just about there. Vision was just upgraded in the past, actually, I think they finished it today. But again, all of this stuff is very time-consuming, and I shouldn't even be able to speak about all this stuff because it shouldn't be my role. So I really, you know, I can't emphasize enough of how important this is.
I think you're singing to the choir.
We had this discussion a couple of years ago. The two positions that really were overdue were the facilities and the IT.
Well, and I would
It's
have brought
not-
it forward earlier, but I've been trying to be very, and we'll talk a little bit in a few minutes, hopefully, about revenues. But I've been trying to be fiscally responsible and not trying to bring too many things all at once, you know? I could have easily come in my first year, the honeymoon period, and says, here's a facilities, here's a economic development, here's a, you know, an IT person, and built $300,000 or $400,000 into the operating budget. But I've been trying to do things, you know, a little bit, you know, piecemeal, I suppose, so.
Bruce?
Does the electronic voting look like it's going to be a big project for the IT person?
No, not a big project, but it's an important project.
But that's another great example, because, you know, it sounds simple, right? Give you a clicker at town meeting, you click the, you know, there a lot
Oh, I'm sorry,
of electronic voting.
I'm sorry, when you said electronic voting, I was thinking the voting booth.
Voting machines.
And you're talking about town meeting,
Voting
right?
at town meeting, right?
Talking about the voting booth, yeah.
No, you're
Oh,
talking
the
about voting
voting
booths. Okay, all right.
Well, both are really good.
Well, we were on the same wavelength.
I thought you meant the town meeting one.
I thought that was
I
going to
did
be a little
too.
bit more simple, but to what Barbara is saying, you know, the town clerk is not an IT specialist, right? The new voting equipment is going to need somebody who is going to be able to set it up, work it through, procure it properly, and this is not necessarily what the town clerk's expertise is in, right? So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be overly complicated, but it could be for a layperson who doesn't understand how all of these interface with each other. So, yeah, I think it's important. But to her point, that's another project that, you know, could be a giant headache at town meeting, is trying to do the electronic voting. And Barbara and I and the town clerk and the town moderator all sitting in a room multiple times talking about this, and we're hearing we need to know about this connection and that connection. I mean, you probably know what the hell they're talking about, but none of us, it's going over our heads. So
Yeah.
I agree with Barbara.
She brought that up. It kind of bolsters my second question, which is, and I'm kind of new to this game, so $70,000 seems sort of short money for the person you're looking for.
Well, we think it's a fair number to start with,
And
so.
it might be more likely to pass through the town meeting.
Well, I hope it will pass through.
Well,
We'll see.
And one of the things that, you know, I kind of feel is very important is maintaining the relationship with Tantascwa, especially on a project management level, because, you know, maybe to your point, you know, if you had someone at the caliber of, like, you know, Greg Rosso at Tantascwa, that salary would be much higher. I don't think we need that. So I think by bringing in this person at 70,000, or what, you know, or whatever it ends up being, and then maintaining our relationship with Tantascwa, so that if we need some project management help as some of these projects go forward, we have them available. And I just think that's a win-win. I mean, Tantascwa has buying power for computers and different things. I don't want to lose that relationship, because that's benefited us immensely over the past several years. So there are a lot of things, and believe me, I am very fiscally responsible. I try to resolve things and not have to spend money if we can do it. But I think that, I'm not sure 3 years from now if we'll still be needing that level of support. But I think, again, 7,500 in a $35 million budget, or whatever our number will be next year, is not a lot of money to spend on IT needs.
Something as critically important as IT.
I'll just say real quick, the value for that salary, I think, is very reasonable. These IT professionals aren't just technicians who are able to install or get systems online. They're, at least in the private field, expected to keep current on legislation, which is becoming more and more important. There's going to be, they got to keep up to date with all the latest threats and be very proactive. So, yeah, it's more of
And
a,
to educate the employees on how the proper use of our equipment
they're responsible
is.
for educating, because that's, you got to get information flowed down to all the users. It really is a necessity in today's environment.
And I think, too, what's really important is by maintaining that relationship with Tantascwa, we have Greg's level of expertise that he is willing to share with whomever we bring in, so that we don't just have a person sitting out here all by themselves. They're going to be able to, interact with Tantascwa IT staff. And we also talked about extensively that obviously, like, this person's going to have vacation time, this person's going to have, they're going to be out sick or whatever, and we will be able to still utilize the services from Tantascwa, so that we're just not, well, you know what, he'll be back in a week. So like I said, I think it's important. I think it can work. Very happy to see this move forward. I hope that, when we get to the Board of Selectmen, that they will agree and town meeting will agree. But I think if you asked any person that works in this town, they would all say that it is definitely needed.
So as far as going to the Personnel Committee and having this graded and all that, so yeah, I mean, I like Jared said, I think it might be on the low side, quite frankly, just because I'm in IT myself. I don't do it, but, and they're very well paid. But when you go to the Personnel Committee, it'll be graded. Will you guys assume some, or not assume, will you decide on some sort of salary, number one, right? Because you'll grade it and you'll put them in a step of some sort, right? Does that have to happen before town meeting?
Does it have to happen? No,
Well-
not necessarily. It probably will happen. I don't know. Mike can piggyback on this, but if we have a good job description in place, approved, the job description approved first, and then scored, it could happen in a span of a month and a half. It may be 2 meetings. It doesn't have to, and it could even happen in 1 meeting.
So that said then, so if there's no, if you don't have any kind of grading at least before town meeting, I was just thinking of, at some point, would this need to be adjusted? I mean, adjusting it down isn't a big deal, but what if it has to be adjusted up?
So you could put a high number and put not to exceed.
Well, you can't.
Can't do that?
We can't do that, but.
Okay.
I've had extensive conversations with Greg at Tantascwa, and he feels that this salary, it will be,
You think
I
you
mean,
can
don't forget
find
too,
someone-
We're talking the municipal world versus
Sure.
private, so he feels that this salary range, based on what we're looking for, that we will be okay.
And frankly speaking, that 70 grand is scheduled for a annual salary. But there's no way, I mean, we haven't even created
Yeah,
a
no, I know,
position.
I understand you won't
Not going to
use
have
it.
somebody on July 1st.
Right. No, I understand that.
So if it turns out to be 75,000 on an annual basis, we'd still have plenty of money in the
Okay.
kitty.
Okay,
Yeah, because
Right,
they're not, you won't have them starting July 1st.
right. Yeah, okay, good point.
All right, you all set with IT?
No,
Oh,
he
Mike.
hasn't.
I had a
Sorry.
couple of questions. I won't belabor the point, but I'm the IT person at my company, not being that deeply knowledgeable about it, so I sympathize with what Barbara's saying. It's not fun, especially when you have people that, in our company, we let people use whatever computer they want, so you have all these battles about what's the best, should it be Linux or Apple or Windows, it's really fun. It is kind of, I think, we hire IT people and I think an experienced person would make more like 80, 90, like a person with 10 years, but you can probably get somebody out of college if they're willing to have learned the ropes on, how to manage and be an administrator, which involves a lot of different things, networking, desktop software, cybersecurity, there's a lot of components to it. One idea I had, though, is maybe, as the needs grow here, they're probably also growing at Tantascwa. And one thing you could consider, if you wanted to, is maybe make it 20% funded by them. Then you could hire someone. If you can't fill it at this salary easily, or keep people at that number, then they could pay part of the cost as their needs grow. But then you'd lose, maybe that person spends a day a week over there, I don't know. But it's just a thought.
Well, I would say this, they were very generous at Tantascwa to say they would incorporate that person into their team mentality.
Right.
Trainings, organization, kind of sharing of knowledge and sharing of experiences, so that, our person would be somewhat knowledgeable about their systems and vice versa. I don't know, I think I would be barking up the wrong tree if I was to go to Tantascwa and say, hey, we want you to pay for a part of this person, and this person's gonna go work over there. Maybe in 3 years, if we find
Yeah,
that
not-
this person is underutilized here, if that were to happen, maybe we would either look at cutting down the hours, or maybe doing a partnership with Tantascwa like that. But I think we have plenty of things on the immediate horizon that wouldn't be something that we would have to consider for the next several years, so.
Probably right. Thank you.
Jared and Mike's point, you call it an IT specialist.
For lack of a better term at this time, but.
You're not excluding the administrative part of the job from this, that they would be where the buck stops, right?
I don't understand.
Barbara wouldn't still be sort of compiling the needs.
I think this person would work with Barbara and myself. I don't know that, I think that Barbara and I would still be somehow involved in day-to-day things. But it would be nice to be able to say, hey, my email's not working, Barbara, can you fix that? Those questions would go directly to the IT specialist.
Thank you.
Oh, so you fix email?
What's that?
You fix email?
I do.
Ah, there you go.
Oh, boy.
In her spare time.
In your spare time. I think the next one that we have here is economic development and tourism. I
Okay.
think we just left it for you. I don't really know why, to be honest. I think it's pretty much level funded.
Yeah, it's just basic
The salary
supplies
comes
and
out of
services.
STA, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I guess we probably could have moved that one. The one after that is facilities, so you might want to comment on,
So I
That
am
increase.
looking at retooling this position. I mean, clearly, the minimum amount of hours that we established for the position were not sufficient. So we are looking to make it a little bit more of a full-time position. I mean, it was technically over 20 hours a week last time, but we're moving that up.
Are you looking to expand the hours of the custodian, or just of the
No,
custodians, or the
the
supervisor?
supervisor, yeah.
So to what? How many hours? Did you say?
We,
I think we were gonna see if we could do 40, but we said 35 at a minimum.
yeah.
Do you have any 40-hour people here?
Yeah,
Department heads?
public safety complex,
Oh.
library.
And here's the difference, is that the facilities person has responsibility in multiple buildings that are open at different times during the week. Public safety is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Libraries are open on Saturdays. Senior centers and town hall and center office building, DPW are usually open just during the working weekdays. But this person, if they're doing their job correctly, should be checking in on buildings on a more frequent basis during the week, at different times during the week as well.
And that's a full-time job at $40,000?
Well, it's kind of I would call it a supervising custodian, I suppose, is the position.
It's a working supervisor?
Working supervisor. I mean, they would be responsible for fixing things or cleaning things in an emergency if the custodian wasn't on duty. So, yeah, they're gonna get their hands dirty, but they're also sitting at a computer and processing payroll, and they're also sitting at a computer and processing bills, going out to bid, getting quotes, dealing with contractors. You know, one of the challenging things that we found with with our experiment this year was that a lot of the contractors were ready to meet with us at 7:30 in the morning. Well, the facilities director only had 28 hours a week of work. So it was, you had to kind of fit that into their normal schedule, and oftentimes it became problematic. And there were just some things that just weren't getting done, you know? We weren't able to keep up on the paperwork and the supervision of the employees and the contracting and quote getting and that sort of thing. So, you know, we tried this out, and we created this position last year to see how it would fit into the operations. I think we had some positive experiences. I think we had some challenging experiences. We've recently had a change. The gentleman who held this position has left the position, so I'm going to be filling that vacancy. But I think that we, you know, we got some good information about how that position is structured and should be structured, and the duties that are important for that position, that moving forward, I think is going to benefit our community.
Will you change the job description at all?
I think we'll look at it, but I don't think that we'll have to change it too much. I think essentially the job description, the grading is probably appropriate.
Well, last year, I think it was last year, we got the description in, right? And
Yeah, we saw
and
it.
it seems like, I don't remember, but you were looking for someone who was licensed, right, in certain things, because you really wanted someone to be able to fix plumbing issues or,
Well,
you know, whatever, do.
I don't know that that's true. I think we would be hard-pressed to find licensed professionals willing to work for the town for $28,000, which is what they were being paid this
Yeah,
year.
I said that last year.
Yeah, I don't think that we were looking for necessarily licensed people.
But I
think
don't
we were looking for
remember.
someone that was more than just you know, may have some handyman experience, but you're not gonna have handyman experience in plumbing, carpentry, electrical work, and all that. You might find somebody who has skills in one of those, or enough skills to get them in trouble, I guess. But to work with contractors so that we're not being taken to the cleaners. If somebody comes in and says to the town administrator, oh, you need to have this light fixture replaced, the town administrator's gonna go, okay, I don't know, but having this facilities person was gonna be that go-between to make sure that the tax dollars that are being spent appropriately. And that's, I think that, you know, sometimes we're gonna have to bring in outside people to do some of this work, but hopefully this person or the custodian will be able to do some sort of basic handyman type of stuff. If we need something built or repaired or refurbished, hopefully that they could do that kind of stuff. Other than that, the expenses are relatively the same.
Anybody else have any questions on that? The next is the town hall building.
Costs of that are essentially the same, with the exception of the electricity has been backed out, as we talked about at our Saturday meeting.
Well, what about the repairs? It seems to have,
Yeah, so we
Increased.
increased that because, as you're aware, we usually come back for reserve fund transfers for the HVAC system. And so I did that in both the town hall and the center office building, and I think that's probably a more realistic number until we resolve the HVAC issues in these two buildings.
Is the center office building the same age?
Yes.
yeah.
They were, both buildings were renovated at the same time and had the same system. Yeah.
And that kind of goes to the next one, that center office building as well.
Oh, just one quick question on, I think it's charter services. Why is it in some budgets it seemed to go up and in others it stayed the same?
So for town hall, it went up because we switched over to fiber.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah,
So
so we
you've got
just,
high
we
speed.
just,
Somebody else
yeah.
that went up though that seemed, oh, Greg's.
So sometimes what's happening is, we'll find out that the speed isn't adequate, so we have to increase
Oh.
the speed.
So that's,
Just another IT-related problem.
yes.
But with the fiber, you can go the fastest.
Yeah, And what'll be nice, well, and we've just switched over, it hasn't been very long, but, you know, what, we would have issues, like, we are on the cloud for Munis, which is our financial software. Libraries connected with, you know, for CW Mars, and so if it went down, we were down. I mean, we'd have customers coming in and we couldn't even get it, you know, onto our system, so that problem will be no more, which is nice.
Great.
So the center office building is the next page, and again, it really just looks like you went up on the repairs.
Mm-hmm.
Zeroed out the electricity.
Well, that's going, well, besides that, but that was in every single budget, went to
Central purchasing.
central purchasing. I was trying to remember which one. So any other questions on those two buildings? Senior center building, since that's a new director, we don't,
So the
that-
reduction in the
yeah.
cost of fuel oil, this is my question, is that because they put in the new windows?
We're deciding not to heat the building anymore.
Oh, okay.
We're giving
because
everyone coats.
That's
and,
phenomenal, that
yeah,
savings.
that is a huge amount. Because
I
of their
looked-
new boilers?
No, you know, I don't know. I looked at the actual expenditures, and we were spending nowhere near
Okay.
The amount that
the
was being
15.
previously budgeted.
So, you know, based on the spending for the past couple years, like, we can go down.
But I will say this, you mentioned something I know tongue-in-cheek, but those new windows have been an immediate noticeable difference.
Sure.
The people who go to that building every single day, those seniors have told me that the first day that those windows were put in, there was a complete noticeable difference in the way that that building felt. It was much more comfortable, it was cooler in the hot months.
Sure.
And it was warmer in the winter months. And I think that that is going to show some reduced usage in our fuel consumption in that building.
And just a question, is that the same rationale for lowering the gasoline from central purchasing? It went down dramatically. I
So the
brought that-
gasoline too, you know, when the, you know, I don't think we really, but we didn't reduce the budget enough when gasoline prices dropped, when, you know, go back to the days when they were really high, not too long
Dropped
ago.
a lot this
They dropped a
time.
lot. And, you know, sometimes I'm hesitant to do things immediately because it's like, you know, is this just a one-year thing and then it's gonna go back? But
And not to mention, we're budgeting 18 months before the end of the fiscal year that we're budgeting. So we have to be looking into the crystal ball and figuring out what's going to happen, what the situation's going to be 18 months from the time we're creating these budgets.
Right, but I looked at what we spent so far this year, and it's right on schedule
yeah,
for what you're
how I
budgeting for next year.
adjusted it, yeah. And, you know, gasoline, it makes me nervous, fuel oil
Yeah.
makes me nervous because something can happen
Gas
tomorrow.
just jumped.
And
Just
that's,
jumped.
yeah,
And
and that's
it'll
what
jump
happens.
back down
And
in a
then,
month. It's-
You know, we haven't gone out to bid yet for oil for next fiscal year. We don't do that usually till the summer.
I think so.
And so, you know, I think you brought up the question about, you know, I think in the public safety complex, his went up slightly, but they already locked in.
It went up 33%.
Okay, I don't remember all the numbers
a
right now,
bunch.
but, okay.
It did go up quite a bit.
But, you know, they already locked in, so that was based on an actual rate. I don't have that yet. But I have to say, I mean, we haven't had to come back for transfers in those areas, so
Yep.
we'll see.
So Leon, while we're on the senior center building, I know there was a study group going on looking at,
We are still meeting diligently. We
meeting.
have a meeting actually next week as well. We are looking, and when I say we, the committee is looking at a lot of different options. We had a feasibility, we had a space needs analysis that was done. I don't know if did I share with you the results of the space needs analysis? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
I'm happy to share that with you. I remember presenting it, I remember,
Probably
I
the
invited
selectmen.
you folks to come to the Board of Selectmen's meeting when I presented the findings with the Senior Center Study Committee.
I don't remember
But
that.
I'll send you folks a copy of the Senior Center and the DPW building space needs analysis.
Madam Chair, forgive me if this is not the right time, but the head of the senior center did say that she was going to be at the selectmen's meeting on Tuesday, and that after
We have a
that,
meeting, yeah.
she would come here.
Yeah, we're going to be in conference room 2.
So we'll be in the
that day.
conference room then, yeah.
Yeah.
You might want to take her first, because I have 2 public hearings that night before she comes on.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So you might want to if you could put her first on, you meet at 7?
Yeah.
You could put her first on your agenda, she can go and meet with you first and then come over to here, because she'll have plenty of time.
Okay.
And then you
That'd
don't
be-
have to wait for her.
That'd be great. I was thinking about that, but I didn't feel like I had the
Okay.
authority to
I
say
already
7
did my
o'clock when
agenda.
she was going to
I
the
know when she was
selectmen.
coming, but that's all right. It's still part of the budget.
But going back to your question, right now, they've been studying and looking at available properties in town, town-owned properties, I should say, that are available for maybe development, and they are in the process of going to tour those properties. At the next meeting on Wednesday of next week, I think they're going to be reporting back as to what their findings are. But the next phase of that would be, down the road, seeking funds for a full-blown feasibility study, looking at what it would take to renovate that building to meet their needs, or build a new center in that meets their needs in another location in town.
So you had that study committee, had the DPW.
Yes.
You may have had somebody reviewing safety complex as well. I don't see those coming forward, it's still in the works, and yet we have annual town meeting warrant, there are no articles in here. So does that mean
We're
we're
not
gonna
quite
wait
ready
yet
for
another
that.
year? You're gonna, we're gonna need a special to do that at
We
some
might,
point
we
during-
might need a special, we might need to do it in the fall, yeah. I don't think, I'm not looking to bring those forward. I don't think anyone is prepared to bring that forward, that article forward at this annual town meeting.
Okay.
And I'm gonna get
No
to,
hard and fast deadlines where, we want to wrap these things up by a certain period of time.
oh, this
and-
is a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm gonna talk, later on tonight, I'm gonna talk about some of the things that we talked
Sounds
about
like it's
last
more of a
night.
race without a finish line. You know when you get there, when all the work is done.
Well, I think it's more defined than that, but it's not as quick as people will think it is. I'll give you a brief, I don't want to go too far off course. When I started in West Boylston, which was 14 years ago now, we started a senior center study project. They just, after 3 attempts, got the funding 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
14 years. And I told the members of the Senior Center Study Committee that story when I first started working with them. If you think that we're just going to magically be able to come up with the $2, $3, $4, $5 million to be able to build you a brand-new senior center and have that pass, there is a lot of steps that need to go through in order to get to us to a position where people, you folks, the selectmen, the townspeople, town meeting, that everybody feels comfortable moving forward with that. You have to dot a lot of i's and cross a lot of t's. Because oftentimes, even the most beautiful senior centers in the state didn't pass in the first attempt. So we're building something that can be successful.
Leon, you said they're presenting their findings next Wednesday?
Their findings on what they're looking at are some of the properties that they're looking at, yes.
Is that a meeting of the council, or would it be at the selectmen?
No, it's at the Senior Center Study Committee meeting. They are public meetings, and I want to say it's at 2 o'clock, I want to say Wednesday. You're welcome to go.
Yeah, I'd like to follow along.
Just give me 2 seconds and I'll tell you the exact date and time.
Thanks.
I believe it's Wednesday at 2, I just want to confirm it. Wednesday at 2, Wednesday the 18th at 2 o'clock.
Thanks very much.
Question. Just curious, did West Boylston get grant money, or is it all funded by the town? Do you know?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know how they ended up structuring it. I've been out of there for a while, I didn't pay
Right.
that close attention to it. I know that the state government provides grants of up to $800,000 a year
Right.
for senior centers. I can't answer your question whether or not they applied for or were successful, I don't know.
Okay, I'm just curious. Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else on the building? Now, do you think that the new senior center director will be able to address her own budget?
No.
No?
So if you have any questions.
So if we have questions, that's on page 34 in the detail.
Are you jumping to the page 34, you said?
Yeah, we've done everything else in between. I believe.
Okay.
I'm only going to things that we haven't done.
So we built in the salaries for the staff. They are correct. And we basically level funded, for the most part, all the other expenses in the lines.
Why did that go down? For the
Because
staff?
we
had
have somebody
turnover?
who started at step one.
Okay, so there's been a change.
Yes.
And how many employees exactly are there besides?
They have a
the-
library director, they have an outreach coordinator, they have an administrative assistant, and they have a part-time program assistant as well. They also have a custodian
That's the one you added, the part-time program person. Was that last year or the year before?
last year.
Last year. Is the custodian within those salaries?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, it is, oh, wow.
The custodian, that was the one town,
It's minimal.
yeah, it's very small.
Right.
That preceded the creation of the
Right.
positions that we had.
Right. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay. We haven't done the veterans agent. So wasn't somebody
I
called?
can answer any questions on that.
I had intended to. Jared is we've been audited this week. I haven't.
Oh, that's right. Well, I mean, there's really not much,
We can help.
Yeah, there's nothing there. I believe it's level, it's totally level,
yeah. Well, his salary went up slightly,
2.5%.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Speaking of a labor of love,
No
that's a
step
job
increase?
that's a labor of love.
We share him with Lester, I think.
We do not.
No? That's
No,
not,
so our previous veterans agent also worked in Leicester, but he retired from Sturbridge.
Right, I remember.
So, yep, so we have a new agent.
Do you know what the veteran software does?
So I don't think they've actually purchased it yet. So the previous agent had requested that, and then new agent hasn't been on that long. But what it allows is for everything to be filed electronically to the state. I don't know where that stands, to be perfectly honest. It's a yearly cost, though, once he moves forward. And again, I mean, that's one of the things.
So the $400 will be annual?
Yes.
So it's some sort of online
I
type
think
software?
it's web-based, yeah.
And just so that you know, the big line item in that budget is the 50,000 for veterans' benefits.
Right.
And we receive reimbursement
Yeah.
eventually,
What is it?
75%.
About 3/4?
It's a year behind.
Eventually.
They're very
bless you.
good.
Oh, they're very good now? Oh, that's good to know.
I think the next thing is, we've done the debt, I believe. We voted that.
You did.
Your debt service?
Yeah, yes. So we're up to unclassified.
Classified, yeah.
We locked in on health insurance, the highlights, I'll just give you the highlights.
Yeah.
We locked in on health insurance for a 2-year rate for 7.5%. Barbara and I deserve all the kudos and credit that you wish to bestow upon us, because that turned out to be a very wise decision. Our claims history had us getting a double-digit increase for next year, but because we renewed at a 2-year level at not to exceed 7.5%, we're actually taking money from them this year. So I'm sure it all will work out in the end, don't get me wrong, but
Next
Hope that
year.
they don't make up, next year they'll make up for it.
the only saving grace is I'm on their board of directors, so they got to be somewhat nice to me, so.
Who is the carrier?
It's Maya. Maya is
okay.
under the MMA. It's the largest municipal health insurance company in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We offer Blue Cross Blue Shield.
They administer it through.
They administer it through
Blue Cross
Maya.
is the administration.
Other highlights here would be the county retirement. You will see that our rates have been going up and up and up. People have been living longer. Pension reform, essentially, we are now paying what we should be paying for several years. Some communities, like Sturbridge, have been subsidized by other communities, and they changed the system a few years ago to make things more fair, and that you're paying your actual costs. And so that's why you see that those increases are what they are. It's a significant number. We are managing it, but it is among the, what you would call the unclassified categories. The category of retirement and health insurance are the two driving factors in that
So
section.
how exactly is that figured? It depends upon the number of retirees
Yeah,
and
age,
what they're getting paid
retirees, yeah,
Salary.
and their while they're.
Salary
Yeah.
and an actuarial calculation.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Every year, they do the annual 4-hour presentation at some place in Worcester County where they go through all the actuarial studies about how things are going, how the performance of their funds are doing, how much underfunded they are, and what our obligations as individual communities will be.
There was a big impact last year when the life expectancy.
Yeah.
actually
I'm happy to
was
bring one of
increased,
you if
and
you'd
all of
like
a
to
sudden
join me
everybody's
this year.
budgets were underwater. Been
And our
through that.
obligations are for retirees from the Sturbridge system. We're not sharing the costs of other towns who may have underfunded or have
No, we're paying actual costs,
actual costs for
For
Sturbridge
Sturbridge
retirees.
only.
actual costs for Sturbridge. The other ones are relatively straightforward and similar to what they had been previously.
What is the streetlights?
Yeah, so I was gonna, because I was watching the last meeting, of course.
Thank
Those are streetlights.
Yeah, so it is the streetlights,
Were we
just what you
close?
think.
Yeah.
And so the reason that,
And we're responsible.
we are responsible.
Every
Yes,
municipality.
and the reason I didn't put that into the electricity line, which was your question, is because we are obligated to report streetlights separately on year-end reports. And so we would prefer not to have to go through manually to,
And the bill is based on the hours of darkness that the lights are on because they're activated by a photocell. They're only on when it's dark and they go off when it's light.
yep.
Because there's no meters on the streetlights, we get an electric bill, right?
We have an
So
electric
you
bill.
you choose,
We pay-
There's a
we pay-
bill.
Yeah, we pay an electric
But
bill.
there's no meter on the pole.
no, you get a bill, and the bill is based on
I know you get a bill.
on the light, the fixture, and the
And the consumption.
the type of light that you have.
Yes.
And they've assumed the electric company assumes a certain usage period and rate and charges you a
They
number.
assume a
based-
certain consumption over a certain number of hours of darkness. I had several of those lights on my property.
Yep.
And that's how you get the bill and you go, oh. And then when you find out that one of the lights is out, and it's been out for 3 weeks or a month,
And you still
and you
get
get, still
charged.
getting billed for the juice because no one's checking to see if the bulb is out. And they just bill you by hours, assumed hours that it's on.
Yeah, because some people do
It happens.
buy and pay for the streetlight on their street, in a lot of, yeah.
We're very frugal
Familiar
about
with-
adding new streetlights.
So, but, you
We know.
know, if someone's aware when a light goes out, because I had that happen where
We should report it.
the light was probably out for 2 months and I'm paying for it, and it's not on.
When a street light is out, and we can tell the people at home, do call the DPW, and they will coordinate to have it replaced. We get those calls quite a bit. Not, I won't say
Right.
quite a bit, probably 5 in the 3 years that I've been here.
Because even if it's not on, we're paying for it, and that's.
But it also helps for public safety.
Sure.
I mean, usually the street lights are strategically placed to make sure that they are in a safe place for people.
Anything else on unclassified?
There is one new item
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah,
just bring to your
insurance
attention.
deductibles, Yes, I think that was noted somewhere.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you folks understand what that is. What we've been doing, if we ever have a copay or something for a accident or an incident that happens, there's a $1,000 deductible that we have to pay, but it's not accounted for anywhere in our operating budget. It was a practice that I had in my previous municipal life, to have just a small little account set up if we have to pay off a deductible or a small claim. If we have to replace, I'm going to make up an example, replace a woman's tire for a pothole that was previously reported and not fixed in time, it caused damage to someone's tire. Instead of filing a claim, which would go against our experience, we buy a new tire for $124 and we save the experience hit. So those types of little things that we, just to mitigate those things and not have to go back to you folks for a reserve fund transfer.
Yeah, which we have done in the past. I think it's the last thing on the actual budget is the central purchasing.
I'm sorry, I thought you were still on this. I just have one quick question. It's really just to refresh my memory. On unclassified, the town audit increase, and I remember either we talked about it, is that the school thing?
So which line are you looking at?
Under town audit.
So the
It
town.
went from 25.
25 to 30,000. We were in a 3-year contract with our auditor, which expired, and we're good. In fiscal 19, we'll be starting a new contract, and so the price went up $5,000.
Oh, okay.
No, the school audit is
The next
listed by
line.
itself.
'Cause that's only every, 3 years?
It's every 3 years, and we're actually in the process of getting that audit done right now.
But that audit, the 25,000, that was a set price for a 3-year term?
Yeah.
prior, so that's,
And even before that, I think, we did pretty well. It's the first time he's increased it in a while.
Yeah.
And then, ready to move on to central purchasing?
Sorry.
Is it easy pass for the, just the paying the rates, or is it for the equipment?
It's just paying the rates. So we have the transponders in vehicles, so all our fleet vehicles have a transponder, the police vehicles, some of the fire vehicles.
that's the last page.
And it's, what I have found over the years is that it's much easier just to add a transponder to the same account. And so what was happening is, the police department would get the bill for our fleet vehicles. I don't want to deal with that, so I just thought it was easier just to pull it out of the individual accounts, put it in here, and then we don't have to worry about it. And it's minimal.
And then the electricity is new to this.
That's not 100,000 in new cost, that's the
Yeah, right,
removal.
it's just, it was just
accumulation.
moved around from every.
Right.
So one of the goals that I've assigned to the town, speaking of goals and merit pay, but one of the goals that I've assigned this year for the town accountant is to prepare some reports on a quarterly basis for the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee on our energy savings due to the 3 solar projects that we have working here in Sturbridge that came on late last year. And I believe Chris is in the process of preparing his first quarterly statement for you folks, and hopefully I'll have that to you folks in the next couple of weeks.
The one that's behind Sturbridge Antiques, that's adjacent to the, is that ours?
Yes.
Okay. Because that's not connected to the one that's over on by the pike, is it?
Yes.
That's all the same, it seems
I
like a
believe, I
far
think we're
distance
talking about the
between
same
the
one.
two.
Is that the Blue Wave one?
Um,
Wasn't that?
The
who it-
No.
Blue Wave one, isn't that one adjacent to,
I thought that was near
We
the
have
lake.
2 projects that are out of town, so let me start with
Right.
that.
okay,
One is,
What-
was the
one
Blue
is-
Wave, now Amoresco.
Oh, that's why they changed.
That's the one
names.
on the Pike, so yes, that's the one on, they call it, oh, shoot, it's not Hall Road, it's Hare Road, thank you. That's what they call it, Hare Road. That one is ours. We have a landfill in Shirley, the town of Shirley,
Yeah, I
where
remember
we
that
are
one.
the prime recipient of the benefit. We're also the host community for a project in Munson.
Oh,
All 3 of those generate the towns, to generate benefit to the town.
but the one I'm talking about, as you pass under the 84 overpass, if you're heading east and you look to the left across the wetland, you can see it in the distance. And I thought that was Blue Wave.
Not the one that's, it's not by Old Sturbridge Village, you're not
No,
talking
no,
about
no,
that.
I'm heading east on Route 20, and I go under the 84 overpass, and there's a wetland there before you get to
Yeah, I
the 3
thought that was
houses.
the one-
And it's in the distance, and I thought that was Blue Wave.
But it's a
But then when
change-
you get up to the
oh, by Walmart?
by Walmart, there's another one behind Sturbridge Antiques, and it's
Okay.
pretty
I
extensive.
believe they're part of the same project.
Oh, okay, because
They were
they're
not
quite a distance
physically-
apart.
It's kind of like a figure 8. It's a funny shape if
Because
you
that's
remember
a
the
long
map.
distance, that's about a
I
mile
believe
and a
it's part of
half.
the same project.
Okay,
It was
so they
kind of
spread
a-
that out pretty well.
But we're doing very well with
So,
green.
so how much are you estimating a year that we get? Or are you still, is it still too early?
I think it's too early for us to be very confident. We're gonna do okay. We're gonna do okay. I think we might revise that number next year if we start to see. We're starting to see, right now, what we're trying to do is attribute the right amount of credits to the right things. We have all of these accounts all over the
Right.
place.
Yeah.
Every building, every light post, every whatever, we all have these bills that are generated. And some of them are right now in the negative because we have so many credits building up and others are not getting enough credit. So Chris and I have a puzzle game. We're trying to put all the pieces together and move this called Schedule Z around, which is the list of all the credits that are coming in and all the places that it could go to try to make sure that it
So
makes sense.
if we have a surplus, we can sell those?
No, I don't believe so.
No, so we have to wait 6 months, and then after 6 months, we can change the Schedule Z for the allocation of the credits. So that's what we need to do now, because like Leon said, if we have a huge credit sitting on one bill, it doesn't help us with paying the other bills. You can't just say to them, move the credit, you have to readjust your Schedule Z and do it that way. So I think that the reason we haven't seen dollar savings yet is because the credits aren't on the right accounts the right way. And when the Schedule Z was put together initially, it was done pretty much as a guesstimate, I feel like.
It was,
As
yeah.
to what percentage to allocate on each of the different bills, and some of them do need to be adjusted.
They have a moratorium in Charlton. Every time you turn around, there's another solar field.
I get calls, I got 3
Unbelievable.
calls in the last
Maritime.
4 days.
It's awful.
I get calls all the time from solar companies. I get calls from people out of state saying, we would like to know, are you interested in buying any of our solar credits? It's amazing, the amount of times that my phone rings about this. Oh, look, the budget's done.
Yes, it is. You want to go right to the town meeting warrant?
Before
Can I
we do
just
that,
ask one question about the
Say
electricity?
no.
They've been here all
Did you just add the bills, or did you project for this year what it would be with whatever this year's rates are going to be?
This is based on usage now. So if the rates were, we're locked into rates though, like we have a, how does that work for the
I didn't understand the question.
You were asking, if I'm understanding you, you're asking if, like, if I've anticipated an increase in rates?
Right.
Right, so we locked into a contract for our rates, I don't know when it expires. but
Yeah.
later.
I think that this is considering what we would ordinarily be paying for electric rates, yes.
Okay, thank you.
But it's a multi-year contract for the
Right.
locked-in rate.
Thanks.
Before we start talking about the,
Okay.
oh, go ahead, no. I didn't know there was another question.
Yeah, I had a question for Barbara.
How are things going?
So Leon, I think the directive he gave all the department heads was to come forward with a level funded budget. Pretty obvious that he's done that. So, and you have a good handle on a lot of things going on out, both your department and others. So from the finance department perspective and your view of everything else, are we adequately providing services to the people in town? Or are there areas where we still need a little bit of support, a little bit more funding would help bring some needed services?
So before I answer that question, let's talk about revenue.
I was just going to say the exact same thing. Because I do think it's important that we, after the Saturday meeting, I pulled the chairman of the Finance Committee aside and said, I think it's imperative that we have conversation, and maybe I've been delinquent in not doing this at the beginning of the budget process every year. And if that's the case, then I apologize. But I think, when I do my Saturday presentation, I always talk about revenues first, because if you don't talk about revenues, you really don't know how much you really have to spend. And I think it's important that we have that conversation, and that we have that conversation publicly, because quite frankly, a lot of times, we oftentimes forget that even though we're doing a lot better than a lot of other communities around us and like-sized communities, we still have quite a bit of concerns and things in our worry closets, or at least in my worry closet, that we need to be cognizant of. Do you all have your book with you?
Yes.
Your budget book?
Yes.
Could you all go to the tab for the 5-year forecast?
I mean, if I could just make a comment, I mean, in some respects, we as a town are very fortunate in that we have the hotel motel tax and
Yes.
the meals tax, because we have so many restaurants.
We get, let me just say
So
this
can you
publicly.
comment on that to some extent, on how much that is perhaps
Between
helping
the-
us in the tax
Between
rate?
those two numbers, we get about $1 million a year. About $650,000 of it goes towards our operating budget. And then we split the remainder, as you remember, between our STA, reinvesting visitors' monies back into promoting the town, which is actually a really innovative and creative idea. And then the other the other half of that third goes towards the betterment. We're going to talk about these when we go over the warrant tonight. But, and those betterment are those things that are improving our community, making it prettier, safer, more, providing for open space and recreation programs here in the town. It has a great human value to, it provides a human value to our community here in Sturbridge. So yes, you are correct. To our bottom line operating budget, we're getting, for argument's sakes, $250,000 a year that our neighboring towns don't have the luxury of having. So we have great benefit in that.
So have you ever done an actual analysis of how that holds down the tax rate?
We do that every year. We have that analysis done. That's how we know what to.
Well, I know, I know you do the
Oh, you mean how,
analysis.
what the tax rate would be, or what our service level?
That's what I
Well,
meant. Or
take our
service level.
existing budget, subtract 675 or
I mean, but we have
$1,000.
room to grow because of we have excess capacity in 2.5,
We're going to
so.
be talking about that in a few minutes.
okay.
We'll be talking about that in a few minutes.
Jumping ahead, sorry.
You're all right.
Ahead of your time.
While he's talking, you should go to the, in the 5-year forecast, right after the 5-year expenditure forecast, the one that says summary.
It says summary town of Sturbridge revenue and expenditure forecast fiscal 18 through 22. Top of the page. You all have it?
So I mentioned memo, then I had a budget analysis of revenue and expenditures.
Yep, then you have the 5-year forecast for revenues and the 5-year forecast for expenditures, get through that, and then there's a section that starts summary.
Yeah.
And then the page after that says property taxes.
Yeah, is that what you want us to
So I'll do a summary.
Okay, yep. You're really fine, it's quite a few pages in.
Yeah, it's probably a good 12 or 13 or something. So,
I think it's closer to the next tab than.
yes, that's fair to say.
Local receipt.
So, municipal financing is not intuitively easy to understand. There are giant books that encapsulate all the municipal finance laws that Barbara and I have to follow. But what I would say is that figuring out revenues is pretty much a very simple process. There's only a handful of categories that go into this, and most of them are outside of our control. So I talk in the memo, actually, Barbara prepared the text at the beginning of this chapter, which talks about what our revenue projections look like. She speaks about the increase in the levy limit, our new growth estimate. So basically, that's a function of math, right? What is our prior levy limit, the values, what we were assessing, and we add new growth to that. We have Proposition 2.5. Now, some of you younger people may not remember that back in the 80s, we had a thing called Proposition 2.5, and it did something. It was one of the first in the country limiting property tax increases. Now, that's been replicated in a lot of other states, but we said property taxes were going out of hand. We need to do something to restrict communities from going crazy in raising property taxes willy-nilly. And they passed Proposition 2.5. It was a major undertaking in the Commonwealth, and it effectively limits what we can what we can assess in new taxes for the upcoming year. All right? So you see, it's a function of math. Prior year levy limit, amended new growth, the 2.5% increase, and then what we anticipate for new growth. So what's new growth? Because that's really the only wild card in this equation, right? The new growth is, what are your new buildings? What are your new improvements? What are your new things in your town that you are going to be assessing that you didn't have a chance to assess the previous year, right? So we've had new construction, we've had new houses, we've had new businesses, hey, we've had new hotels, right? So all of those things that are new for the upcoming year, the assessors are charged with establishing. They work with the building department, and they come up with a number that we have to justify to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have to say, yes, new growth is what we're saying it is. And that all adds up to the big category of taxes. And of our I was gonna use the number. Of our, let's just say, total revenues, 34 million and change, 23 million of it, almost $24 million of our $23 million comes from property taxes, comes from the taxation side of the equation. These are something that we have no control over, all right? On top of that, I'll just go for reference sake, even though this doesn't add to necessarily our bottom line. For bookkeeping purposes, it does, but we also add to our property taxes any debt exclusions that we've passed. Now, we have two on the books. You all know about these already. Our town hall project and our Burgess Elementary School project. Those projects were done with a debt exclusion vote, and those stay on the books until the project is paid off. I don't remember how many more years Burgess is and how many more years Town Hall is, but they're gonna be on the books for a few more years. So they're not going away anytime soon, is what I'm saying. So those are things that are gonna increase our taxes above the provisions of Proposition 2.5, okay? So that's the town voluntarily saying, we know that we can only raise our property taxes 2.5%, but for these two projects, we're willing to increase our taxes temporarily for those projects, okay? So let's put those aside for a moment.
Oh, can I just jump
Please.
in? In the early 90s, we passed an override, which is permanent, correct?
Yes.
So where does that show up?
It's in your the above category.
First number.
In the prior year levy limit?
So that levy limit keeps carrying forward every year. So
Okay.
yeah, it got added in whatever year you guys did a 2.5 override.
Yeah, it was
went into that.
91, I don't know, somewhere around there.
So it's built into your base, and then that carries over.
Okay.
Once you do that, so between those 2 years, you'll see that increase of whatever that number was.
If we went back.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But that's a good question. The next category is a category called local receipts. Local receipts we're estimating to be slightly more than $4 million. So this is where some communities, if left unabated, could artificially pad what their revenues are going to be by saying, oh, well, we're just going to take in $7 million in local receipts next year, so we're going to raise our budget an extra $3 million. Well, the state doesn't allow you to do that. State is actually very frugal, and when we submit to the state every year, we have to be able to justify any increases in what we're saying our local receipts are going to be. So, in effect, we can't really monkey around with the business of padding local receipts. It's essentially, these are the fines that we collect, the permit fees that we collect. There's a lot of other things that fall into the categories of miscellaneous local
Does
receipts.
that include excise taxes?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So like later when you flip forward to the 5-year forecast for revenue, that gives you the breakdown of all the categories that fall into
Yeah, I
that.
thought it did, yeah.
That might be more information than you want tonight, but yes, we'll go down that. Next is state receipts. Now, state receipts is our local aid numbers. Now, let me tell you, I sent you, well, you probably haven't seen it yet, late this afternoon, House Ways and Means numbers came out. And a slight increase over what we got from the governor's number. Yeah, it's an election year. I anticipate that the state is going to be as good as they possibly can be in an election year. The governor is up for reelection, the House is up for reelection, and the Senate is up for reelection this year. So if any year we were going to get something, this would more than likely be the year.
Is
So-
lottery money in there?
Yes.
State lottery?
Yes, yes. But it's not, we're not solving any problems. I think the difference between what the governor provided to us and what the state house, the house numbers were, is in the ballpark of probably 20, 30, maybe $40,000 at the maximum, okay? That's what we have left to spend. By the way, sharing with all the departments that fall under us, including regional schools, I mean, all of that, it all goes to the same kitty, okay? So our revenues now then come to $34,353,560. That's our monies. That's what we have to spend for revenues. Let's go down to the bottom category.
Can I just ask a
Oh,
question?
please.
This is good, this is very helpful. Back on local receipts?
Yes.
I looked to see, what it what they entail, I get it. When you mentioned, so permits and licensing and whatnot, and you said, so two things, you have to budget for this, you're saying? You
We
can't-
account for that in
you have to
our,
account for that.
draft budget, right. Our draft revenue budget, sorry.
Now, the Board of Health is planning on raising all their permits and fees. Does that, is that included?
It is not, because they haven't done it, I don't know what they're going to do.
So
We
how
don't
do-
anticipate, we cannot anticipate what boards and committees are going to do. We can't justify that to the DOR
But at what point do you justify it? Is
when
what-
we prove the money is in our account. So next year, let's just say we raised all of our fees, and all of our fees are gonna net us an extra 100,000. I'm not saying it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But let's just say we went across the board and we raised all of our fees, and we're gonna net as a town an extra 100,000. When we've demonstrated that our local receipts, we estimated 4 million, and we actually took in 4.1 million, we can then go to the DOR and say, because of this, we're able to say, we're able to justify the 4.1 and get that extra 100,000 built into local receipts for next fiscal year. Not fiscal 19, I'm talking fiscal 20.
And what if they, okay, and what if your forecast was off and you came in below that?
Well, there is a thing that's called negative free cash. So if we were doing that consistently and we started to see that our free cash, it would basically, would take a hit on free cash. If they would,
You have to raise it.
you would have to raise it and appropriate it, or they take it from free cash,
So,
your certified free cash.
but, you know, to your point about Board of Health, so if you go back to the 5-year forecast for revenues, the Board of Health permits are 35,000 projected for fiscal 19. They're not going to double every fee, I wouldn't think. But if we have, like, let me give you a better example. So, water and sewer rates, for instance. When water and sewer rates increase, we are able to justify to the DOR that there's an increase in revenue for water and sewer, because I can say rates went from $8 to $9, our usage is, our estimated usage is X, therefore, we're going to result in increased revenue of Y. If we can do that and justify it, we are allowed to take the increase. So for instance, right now, Board of Health hasn't spoken publicly. I don't know what they intend to do on their rates. We know that there's been conversation to us, and they said it when they were at your meeting, that they intend to.
Building department is in the same boat.
Right, they're looking at their rates. But I would have to have, so let's say they were going to increase the rate for something,
Something.
a food
Food
license. And they knew that, they issue 100 of these licenses a year, and they went up by $25 on every license. Then I could justify something like that, but I'd have to have the data to be able to know. So, right now, I don't have that data to make an increase in this area for budget purposes. But when we get to the point of prior to setting the tax rate, if I know that information, I can adjust the revenues. And I do that a lot of times, because right now, when I'm doing this budget, I'm making calculations based on knowing 6 months of the fiscal year, right? Because I'm putting this together in December. In January, I only have 6 months of information. When I'm setting the tax rate, we've closed the fiscal year, I know the revenues for the whole year. So there are several categories where I will, prior to setting the tax rate, I will adjust the revenue numbers upward, sometimes downward, it depends. So it's a moving target. It's not, what you're seeing on this piece of paper will not be the number that we move forward with when we set the tax rate. So yes, we can adjust some of the things, but if the fees went up minimally, which like some of the building stuff that Nelson is recommending, some are going up, some are going down. For me, don't forget, we budget conservatively here. What would I do? I'll use the number that we had for actual revenues
The previous year.
the previous year, or, I look back a few years just to make sure there wasn't something fluky that happened that skyrocketed the fees. And I would rather be conservative and have them come in higher then
Then
to
we
your
have to make
point,
up a
then I
deficit.
have to make up, you know, a deficit in the category.
Okay.
Good questions.
Thank
I want to go to the last line on that page on summary, because this is something that we need to be very cognizant of. When I started here, we had fiscal 16's excess levy capacity, which means taxing to the max, right? We don't tax to the max because we didn't have to. We were living frugally, we were being responsible. In fiscal 16, I had $1.2 million in excess levy capacity, fiscal 16. Fiscal 17, I had $1.3 million in excess levy capacity. Fiscal 18, where we are now,
And it's on your sheet.
is on your sheet,
Yeah.
$985,000. Estimated with the budget that we're proposing right now, excess levy capacity, $585,000. Right? The bottom line. Look what happens to that number next year. More importantly, let's look at what happens in 2021, right? Here's what I don't anticipate. We're not going to have any changes, my guess is, in the top category, the big category of taxes, property taxes, right? Unless we're going to talk about a operational override. Not a debt exclusion, a operational override, okay? So, yes, that number, I think Barbara's numbers are correct going out to 2022, right? Are we going to see giant increases in local receipts? I'm going to say maybe, but I'm not going to say yes, right? I don't anticipate that we're going to see giant revenue increases in our local receipts in the next 3 years. We might see some increases, but nothing that you're going to be able to say you're going to make up $1 million. And what about local aid? I can confidently tell you, in being a town administrator for 15 years, I will guarantee you we're not going to be seeing any massive increases in local aid in the next several years. So what does that mean? That means that starting as we anticipate in 2021, which is the reason why we do this 5-year forecast in the first place, by the way, we anticipate that we're going to start to see we are no longer going to be having any excess levy capacity. We'll be talking about taxing to the max, and even then, we're running into a deficit, which means we're not likely to be able to meet the current level of spending moving forward, starting in 2021. Right? Yes.
So what, on the operating budget, where it appears that's growing, and that's the difference, what is the major contributor to that?
Well, look at,
What do we have for a contractual expense? Would that be all teacher salaries or whatever else is that a task?
well, at that point,
Those
we're
the
going to
big
have to be
ones?
talking really hard and fast about things that happen all throughout the town. We need to be having these conversations now. We need to be thinking very carefully about everything that we do as a community, as a board of selectmen, as a department head, as a finance committee, as a finance director. We all have to be thinking very carefully about these things, because every decision that we make may have a ripple effect down the road. And we haven't even talked about the thing that Mike and I talked about last night. And I'm going to get to that in just a few seconds as well. Because we're just talking about our regular operating needs, right? We haven't talked about our capital needs. We're smarter than a lot of other communities, and we're better than a lot of other communities in that we account for monies in our operating expenses every single year for things like capital expenses. We have a pretty good free cash pot that we've been kind of working with over the last several years. But we've been doing the right thing by putting aside a little bit here, a little bit there for these purposes and that purposes, and for rainy days in our stabilization funds. But we have big decisions that we have to make as a community in the next several years. And I actually took something that you and I talked about probably the last time we actually met as a group, not the Saturday meeting, but I put together a list of what I believe are some of the big things that we're going to be looking at as a community over the next several years, right? We've got, hold on, 8 Brookfield Road. I'm going to go, these are things that you've all heard about in the past, right? 8 Brookfield Road, we've talked about doing, you know, a renovation of that project. I'm putting that about $450,000 is our, you know, these are the things that we're considering. The senior center, right? We talked about it earlier tonight. I'm estimating 2 million. I could be way wrong, by the way. It could be 5 million, by the way. But if we did a refurbishment, could we do a refurbishment for 2 million? Maybe. So I'm just putting aside a number on this. Let's say 2 million for that. McGilpin Road, the water issue that we talked about earlier. At some point, we may need to be running a water line there, right? We talked about this as a community last year, and it hasn't gone away in the last year. Are the town going to be part of that solution? I'm saying 10 million. Greg gave me a number between 7 and 15. I'll use 10 for tonight's.
It's like $1 million a mile, isn't it?
It's
It was.
where you gotta go, right? Public safety complex. On one of our listed items, I'm putting 2 million aside for that, okay? By the way, I'm not putting aside $2 million for any of these projects. I'm just accounting for these. Could we refurbish the building for $2 million and help solve a lot of problems there? Probably. So I'm using that as a number. Replacement of the HVAC system at the library. We already know what that number is. We talked about it recently, $300,000. We're going to be voting at the annual town meeting on a $6.7 million field project. We'll put that out there. Public safety communications overhaul. Our public safety, every citizen in this town should be concerned that we need a lot of work to be done on our public safety communication. I'm talking dispatch, I'm talking about interdepartmental communication, external communications, $3 million. DPW building. I put aside $1 million for DPW-related refurbishment improvements. How much does all that add up to? And these are just the ones that I've pulled aside and highlighted. There are other things as well that we haven't talked about. HVAC system for this building. It's not quite on the radar screen, it isn't me, but we don't have a cost for that. But those types of things, these are the things that we need to be worried about as a community. And that's the reason why I am been very fiscally conservative about the approaches and putting on new positions and committing to new positions. I know that we'll use I don't want to pick on the police department. The police department has a manpower proposal that has been brought before the board and brought before the town for probably 10 or more years. That cost is $1 million. That cost on an annual basis is $1 million if we were to adopt that. The safer firefighters, same thing. If we were to build those things into our operating budget, I don't have the excess levy capacity to pay for those things. So what do? Do we go to the schools and say, well, we're very fair to you usually in our operating budget, but essentially this year's budget and last year's budget, all the new monies that we got in taxes, receipts, state aid, all the monies that we got new over the previous year went to schools and health insurance, maybe pension, but those categories, which means any increases on the town side of government, excess levy capacity. I think that's fair to say. So now that I've thrown a wet blanket on everybody on the whole thing, we're still better off than a lot of most communities. I don't want to sound negative. I'm actually very positive about the town and very positive about our finances. We are way better than a lot of other communities, and we have way more services, way more programs, way more ways that we improve the quality of life of the people who live here. Last night, Mike Hagar and I sat across the street at the Public House for an open space forum, and it was a wonderful experience hearing about the positive things that we do to preserve open space, the trail system, the way that we protect our natural resources here in the town of Sturbridge that you can't find in other communities, right? Wonderful. But we have to understand that unless something dramatic happens with property taxes, local aid, or our local receipts, the gravy train is about to slow down and/or stop. And then we're going to be back at the position where we're making tough decisions, more than likely by fiscal year 2022. It's probably even Steven in 2021. 2022, we're going to have a conversation, because right now, and I know these are not going to be exact numbers, we don't have that kind of a crystal ball, but right now we're looking at a budget deficit of $345,000.
Did last year's 5-year forecast show the same tipping point at 2021, 2022, 2022?
Yeah, for the most part. So,
But we don't always have this conversation, I think is the point.
and I think too that, last year, you remember when the schools came in, there was some, our enrollment level at Tantascwa kind of tipped us so that the cost set for our assessment had really skyrocketed last year. I mean, honestly, I was hoping that that was a one-year thing, but it affected us again this year. Hopefully that doesn't happen again next year. I don't know. But again, I think that this tab of the book is one that's probably not really looked at by most people. The paperwork from the summary back is stuff that I added this year that I don't normally give. But if you look at, 5 years forward for revenues, you will see that local revenues are pretty much flat. State aid is pretty much flat. I mean, when we don't, the town of Sturbridge does not rely heavily on state aid, which, is unfortunate for the taxpayer, but really, in my opinion, is what has kept us in a much better situation than a lot of our neighboring communities over the past several years. Because when cuts to state aid happened, they were minimal to us. Just like when increases to state aid are given, they're minimal to us. So we can deal with a $20,000 to $40,000 swing one way or another. When it's $40,000 forward, we're like, okay, thank you, we'll take it. But it doesn't affect what we're doing here. But for other communities that rely heavily, any change or a decrease in state aid has a substantial impact on budgets, which is why a lot of communities around here, 10 years ago probably, in that ballpark, had layoffs and all the things that we never had to endure here. We were very lucky. I think that, as, I understand, so now to your question, let me throw a few things in, but, when I watch your meetings, and I don't do it because I have nothing better to do, but I think it's important to kind of stay on top of what you guys are talking about, because from the conversations that are happened, I was able to go back to Leon and say, look, I really think we need to do a review of where we stand financially, revenue-wise. Every department that comes forward, if you ask the question of what do you need or what could we be doing that, we're not doing, every department's going to tell you what they would like to have. But the reality is, and you kind of hit the nail on the head, I'm seeing it from a broad perspective. Leon's seeing it from the broad perspective. The department heads, when they come in, pretty much most of them, not all, but most, see it from their four walls and what they're directly responsible for. They don't see the overall picture. But what they do see is that Sturbridge is very fiscally sound. Okay, so when you think, and probably maybe sitting on that side of the table too, well, we can afford to do these things. But, I'm looking at the long range. The SAFER grant that we got for the firefighters, great. Year one, 75% funded. Next year it drops to 50. The third year it's 25, I believe, right? If you look at these numbers, that's potentially going to be an issue. Now, the chief did mention, there may be one retirement, I believe.
That's why I asked about the
Yeah.
attrition number, because
Right, and so, you know, I'm just saying, I totally understand the concept of public safety is very important, and I understand when Chief Ford, you know, it's his job to tell you, these are the things that I'd like in my department. But, you know, there's other, you know, when I'm saying that it's, the IT person is important, I can't compete with public safety, because public safety is always going to be number one on the list. But at some point, you have to look at everything and say, you know, how do we prioritize not just public safety needs, but everything that's happening in all the departments to be able to move the town forward, or to, you know, maybe get a better bang for our buck, or take the workload off of other people for things that, you know, maybe they, through, you know, have just kind of inherited, but they shouldn't have. So,
I think what we do is we take, that's why I've been asking for, since I've been here, a level service budget. Tell me what you want extra on a separate submission, but give me a level service budget, and then tell me why that won't work. And that's kind of the approach that I've been taking, actually, since we had our last economic downturn, as Barbara said, probably 7 or 8 or 9 years or so ago. That's been my approach almost every single year since I've been doing municipal budgets. And then I take all of the wish lists items from the department and try to prioritize them as to what does our organization need the most right now, and what are the things that we could actually afford right now, and maybe to some degree into the future as well.
Well, a few years ago, this committee took what was perceived as the heavies when we recommended no action on the barn, the town fields at the barn. And everyone said that we were a bunch of ogres, and it was $6.5 million.
They said that?
Yeah, you think so?
But we had 6 projects, now you have 8 or 9. Now there's more
When
projects.
we had all these other things that had to be done, it would have been irresponsible for
No,
us
those
to
projects
recommend
were
that.
existing before, they just weren't presented in that manner all at once.
Right, no, but we listed a number of these that you have on the
Yes, I
list
know.
back then, and now you've added a couple more.
How many are built into the project, to the forecast? How many of these are actually built into?
None.
None, because they'll all have to be debt exclusions, because as you
Okay.
can see, we can't afford to do any of them under the constraints of,
And you talk about the departments having their own 4 walls. Well, there's certain elements in our town, elements, I use that word not in a negative way, but certain groups in the town have their own priorities, and there's a large number of people who have a priority to have more athletic fields.
And-
And I don't blame them for that. I wish we could do that.
And don't get me wrong, I support the field project. I think it would be a tremendous asset to our community, and actually probably a revenue enhancer for our community as well.
If we could count on
But-
that, great.
As we outlined, we have a plethora of things that we have to have in our worry closet.
But don't some of these debt things that we're paying now, don't those start to roll off?
No,
No, I think I said that when,
not for a long time.
Burgess is probably 18 more years, 17 years.
Oh, it's 20 year, okay, was
I
it?
mean, I don't have my,
Yeah.
I didn't bring up the town meeting,
that's-
But the town hall does.
but in the back it
Probably
has.
gotta be, at least,
But what about the
It's
town,
over a $20 million project. I mean,
yeah, it's gotta be at least 17 years.
Oh, yeah.
what about the town hall project?
We're 6 years into a 20-year.
It was 20 years? I thought it was less than that. Okay.
No.
So Leon, let's find some other revenue here. There's a, in the town meeting warrant, there's a article to ban recreational marijuana. Without getting into the policy issues and whether that's right, wrong for the town, let's assume, planning can come up with a means to, zone it in an appropriate way and have adequate controls and so forth, that it fits. Doesn't marijuana operations provide an opportunity for us to collect additional tax revenues? And we have a medical facility that is proposed in town. Any idea what the expected revenues to the town are from that, and are those included in your forecast?
They are not included. Yes, there would be revenues associated with that. You raise a hot button political discussion that this town will have at the June town meeting.
And looking at this warrant article, you're gonna ask, I'm sitting here trying to figure out what my recommendation should be, and there's a policy issue that I think is appropriate from selectmen, planning board, town meeting, and then there's the financial side of this. Is this thing gonna, give us some financial opportunities, or is it gonna cost us some money if we are
I think
allowed
the
to
answer
come
to that is both yes. I think that, and I'm not going to speak in favor of the article to ban recreational marijuana or to oppose it. What I would say is, I think everyone should agree that if there were recreational marijuana retail facilities in town, that there would be revenues associated with that operation. I think it would also be fair to say that there could be costs associated with that as well. I don't know if I could do an adequate job this evening to give you a good answer for that, but I will tell you that none of those costs or benefits are built into this operating budget. It would be the same as being if there was a casino. We can't build the casino revenue into our operating budget until we start to see the monies actually in our bank account. And then we could say, okay, we've raised $2 million in casino money last year, we're going to budget for it in our next year. Same thing for medical or recreational marijuana proceeds, whatever that may
But as a
be.
community that has one of those facilities, we get a tax stream or revenue stream coming from those facilities by being in town here, that if we're looking for,
Medical is slightly different than recreational, but I just want to make sure that you understand that. We are negotiating a pilot agreement as established by Mass General Law for the medical marijuana facility. It will give us some monies on an annual basis, not, because who knows, maybe the project doesn't happen,
Yeah.
right? There's no building there yet, there's no pot being distributed at that facility right now, so we don't build that into our operating budget. We're not from Missouri, but we have to show me that there's money coming in for that. Maybe this time next year, we will be seeing revenues, and we'll put it into our operating budget. Maybe that makes our 2021 number turn into 2021 and a half, closer to 2022.
so I guess along the same lines, if I look at your new growth, there's a flat $150,000, probably based on what you've seen in the past. When Jean was here, she ran down a long list of things that are coming into town, lots of upgrades, new developments. So you only captured the first $150,000 of all those things in your movement.
No, that's not.
It's $150,000 of taxes.
No, that's not true. So first of all, you can't count for things that haven't even,
Been built,
been built.
they're starting.
Okay, so the 100, I think it's 190 that I used.
It's 190 for 19. I think
Right,
you-
so that was based on, again, it's very difficult to build a budget, so, new growth in fiscal 18 is 363,000. I'm sure when I started the budget process, I probably used 150. How do I come up with those numbers? I talk to the assessor as I'm putting the budget together, and I say, what do you know for new growth right now? Because she's working on it all year long as things are happening. And so her number was slightly lower than 190 this year when I asked her that question. Now, will more stuff happen in the next 6 months? Of course. She's going to finish everything off by the time we have to get our new growth figures and information to the DOR. That number will change. But the 150 going forward is based on, we are pretty safe that at a minimum, we will have $150,000 of new growth here. But I can't count, we've been talking about the 40B project down the road for how many years now?
Yep.
It's not here yet. So there are a lot of things on Jean's list that, may happen, but they may not.
The HEAL project is another example. We've been talking about that for 2 years, right? And there's no shovels in the ground yet, so we can't assess any value to that.
So, the bottom line is, may this not happen? Yes. But I think, as you're meeting with all the departments and you're speaking to them, I get nervous, I know Leon gets nervous, about being able to sustain what we do. Nobody wants to be sitting in a position years from now saying we need to cut something. We don't want to do that. But to your original question to me, is there something we could do in probably every department or some, most, I don't think, I think that this town offers a very good service level to the people that live here. I really do think that in comparison to other communities. I think to Kathy's point, this town is very fortunate to have all the hotels and motels in town, that we are able to benefit from the hotel motel tax. The things that we're able to purchase through betterment funds.
No other town can do.
Towns don't do that, for sure. It is enviable. I wish that I had the opportunities that we have here in my hometown. But we're not in that same situation. And so, we don't, all the things, just look at the betterment list. Any other community would have to fund that stuff through their operating budgets. And that's why those things don't happen. That's why you don't see, all the stuff we do under beautification doesn't happen in a lot of
Yeah,
other
that would,
communities.
all that beautification stuff would never,
Would never, you wouldn't be able to.
some of the public safety might, but
Yeah.
Right, but you get my point.
Oh, yeah, none of that would ever fly in the
Right,
town.
so, like Leon said, our levy limit isn't gonna change. That number that I have here is the number going forward. The 2.5% increase is not changing. That's the number we have. The only things that fluctuate are the new growth number. Local receipts, again, if you look at them for years back, you'll see they're pretty flat. And, some of the bigger things, hotel motel, meals tax, excise tax, those are all economy driven. I am very conservative on those numbers. If we have a 1 year spike in something, I am not going to increase the number based on a 1 year spike, because the chances of that happening, if it happens 3 years in a row, then okay, great, we'll move forward with it. But, it's basically, it happened year 1, it happened year 2, and then maybe year 3, I might say, okay, I'm gonna increase slightly. And then state receipts, you can see if you look at this, we actually got a decrease from 18 to 19 in state receipts, and that was because of the charter school. That's the reality.
Do you want to talk about the warrant?
Can I just quickly, since my first year, I wanted to just make sure I'm on the same wavelength with you. When you said that the fields might bring additional revenue, you meant because of a rise in property values, or is the field itself revenue generating?
Well, I wasn't specifically thinking that, although you might be right, it could actually provide, look, when we were at that meeting last night, they had a list, it was a very good meeting, by the way. It had a list of why people moved to the town of Sturbridge. Number 1 on the list, I think, was schools, right? So, yeah, we do very good by our schools.
It was proximity to highways with schools.
Oh, highways, that's right, proximity to the highways. Presumably, new transplants to the community thought it would be a great way to get to Boston, living in Sturbridge, right next to the Pike entrance, presumably. Is that true, Jim?
Our experience, if you can get there.
At some point.
Yes, you will eventually get there.
If you leave at 5
But it was in the
morning, you
top.
can get there in under an hour.
So where I think that it could bring in revenues is that, yeah, there's a lot of business to be made in tournaments for group kid sports and youth sports, right? So we have hotels, put those same fields, I'll pick on my neighboring town, we'll pick on Munson, for example, right? We'll pick on Munson, they're not here. They have a whole bunch of fields in Munson, well, they have very few restaurants, they have no hotels that I'm aware of. Wouldn't you rather go to Sturbridge, where you could actually put teams up, actually have places to go out to eat with the kids, and actually go to the fields in town? So could I see an opportunity for revenues? Sure. I'm not accounting for any of that, but yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Do you think that on the charter school, do you think that will flatten out at some point? You have it going up a bit.
We have a brand-new
next year.
charter school.
I know.
Those are actual numbers from the state, which actually in the version that just came out this afternoon, they did go down slightly, but I haven't
State
adjusted for
assessments?
that yet.
But remember, charter school reimbursements, you get a lot of money the first year.
Right, I know,
You get little money afterwards.
right.
Yeah.
I should have brought that paper up.
I'm just wondering if,
You get none, because
If
the full
the-
percentage in year 1 isn't even. It's then in year 2 and 3, I wish I had brought that up. Whatever percentage you're supposed to get, because year 1 isn't being fully funded, there's no money in years 2 and 3.
I think you're supposed to get 75%, and I believe
Right.
they're funding charter school money reimbursements at 71%.
I can email you guys that info tomorrow, because Deb Boyd and I talked about that. I just don't remember.
I'm just wondering if the numbers will stay flat or even go down from Sturbridge. I know that's probably impossible to predict.
We have a very good school system here.
Right,
We have a great elementary school, we have a great middle school, we have a great high school. So I don't anticipate that we're going to be the hit as hard as
Southbridge.
some of our other neighboring communities that will go unnamed.
$1 million.
I think we just named them.
Not by me.
Yeah, okay.
You want to go over the warrant?
Yeah, quickly.
I'll get you there.
Huh?
I'll get you there.
So how about given the hour, maybe instead of just the standard articles, you point out the ones that are a little
I'll be happy to.
unique this year?
There's nothing really new. The first few articles are annual town reports, our Community Preservation Committee report, and the Historic Cemetery open space. There is an article that the Community Preservation Committee brought forward that is new. The Historical Commission is interested in applying for a grant through Mass Historic Commission to put some interior storm windows and weather stripping at the center office building. It will make that building more energy efficient, for one. Two, it won't detract from the historical nature of the building if we do interior storms. I really credit the Historic Commission for doing their diligence on this. I expect that we'll be able to get at least 50% of that $30,000 back from the state. So it's basically $15,000, but we have to appropriate the full amount and then apply for the grant. But we anticipate that we would get that grant. Article 6, 7, and 8 are essentially standard. Article 8 is the town budget. We kind of went through that already. Water Department and Sewer Department are the next two articles. Water Department is going to see an increase in the rates for next.
Sewer.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said it backwards. Water is going to remain stable. We're going to be needing a increase in the sewer rates for next year. We'll be discussing that more shortly. Our revenues are down on that side of the equation. Article 11 is a standard article. It is our article that we use to vote all of our sewer debt. And the public access, you remember last year was the first year we had to do a public access budget. So now we build that into our regular town meeting warrant every single year.
Can I just, and you're gonna notice if you compare to last year, there's quite an increase in capital. They need a bunch of new equipment in that department, and so that's why there's the increase.
Now, this money is not funded by they're funded by the taxpayers, but it's not really taxpayers' money per
That's
se.
from the cable.
The
Correct.
cable, yeah.
So
Cable
when we
bill.
need cable equipment, it's out of that little 40 cents that you folks might pay for the people watching at home, in their cable bills every year for public access support. We get monies to support providing public access programming to our community, providing the programs that, the selectmen's meeting, the finance committee meetings. And our equipment is a little older, needs to be replaced and on a regular basis, and we're going through that process right
Are we
now.
all drawing from the same fund, or is the 40 cents per customer here in Sturbridge going into a pot designated?
Our money comes to us.
Our money comes to us.
Yep.
Leon, just a quick question. I think you've told us before, but can you break down the amount, percentage of business taxes that pay versus
Yes,
property?
I can. I don't think I can right now, but I can. I think that residential taxes, I want to say were 72%. That number sounds familiar. But we will get you that number. It's actually, I think it's in the, oh, wait, I might have it. 1 second.
I just,
1 second. I might have it in my budget list.
That's an interesting number to know.
I might.
I just wanted the big picture.
Sorry, what was the question again, Bruce?
He wanted to know how much was business, how much was residential. And I just want to make sure I didn't put it in my budget message.
I know I heard it last year at the town meeting.
Is that in the book from last year? No, the
Budget book?
town meeting
Blue coat.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it might be in that book.
Yeah.
I don't have that with me, but we'll get you that number, okay?
But it's something around,
I believe it's like
3/4.
72% residential. Then there's a category for
I
open
have it with me.
space.
Is this the one you're talking about?
I don't.
You don't think it's in there?
I
don't remember
But
that.
I'm logging on to the state.
We might have the answer before we leave. I'll keep going through the warrant.
Thank
But
you.
that's a good question.
Thank you.
It's not in that book?
Community Preservation Debt Service is an
Barbara's
annual
looking it up right
article.
now.
It's basically this, it accounts for all the debt that we account for that we borrow for community preservation purposes. Article 14, we already talked about a little bit. It's the town barn field project.
So where's that money coming?
That would be a debt exclusion. I think Barbara mentioned it earlier. Any of those things that we would be looking at, well, I won't say any of those things.
Doesn't
Most of the
CPA have a
things.
recreational portion to it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's all
$1
written.
million stormwater community preservation.
So it would basically be a debt exclusion of $5.7 million.
Yeah, 2 years ago, CPC was putting in
Think it
a
might
certain
be in
amount.
this one?
And they will again, yeah, okay.
They have again. Article 15 is our STA article. It's pretty much stable and stagnant from the previous year. Article 16, let's talk about that for a minute. We talked about earlier how we use our tourist dollars that come into our community for not meals, only hotel motel taxes, right? So betterment, we have $182,000 that we're spending on the town's betterment. These are $182,000 that would be built into, as Barbara said, another community's general operating budget that we don't have to account for that way. But we have to vote them because it's still taxpayer monies essentially, so the taxpayers have a right to decide how to use those funds. Capital improvement,
Wait, sorry, are you just going through this quickly as an
I was
overview?
asking.
Yes,
yeah.
because it's 9:45.
Well, you're not
Yeah.
going to vote on all of these tonight, right?
No, but I was curious to know why the difference between Article 15 and 16.
There's a
I mean, because there's a dollar amount, $1,000.
Because none of the
$1,000.
dollars
Yeah, that's a
match?
good question.
Good
Oh,
catch.
I know why. Because under Article 16, I found my first typo.
I see, there's one right here, too.
So which one's right?
This doesn't
There's
match
quite a few.
this.
None of it makes
Ooh.
sense.
Yeah.
This one says 161 in the words.
Yeah, I know, we found two typos. That's why I raced to get this done for you. too.
Okay, gonna
That's
be on
okay.
It
version
should be
2.
181,221.
And
In both of them?
in both of them?
Yes, it has to be, it has to
Well,
be the same
Betterment's
number.
182.
181.
Betterment says
I
182,221.
know, they're supposed to be 181,222.
STA says 181,221.
182,221 is the
What
right
is it?
number. 182,221.
I mean, these are-
182,221.
We can iron them out. I just wanted to know what the number was.
Yep, no, you're right. 182,221. I'll fix that tomorrow.
No, no worries.
Capital improvement, we have a capital committee in town. I know you
Oh, it
folks
is one
see
of
that. You have a separate section in your budget book that all speaks to capital. I won't go through all those tonight. I'm assuming that, unless you want me to, I'm happy to do so.
Well, I'm on the committee, so they can grill me.
You're on the committee so they can grill you, because you were very involved in this.
We didn't drill you already?
We haven't gotten to it yet.
And then we get to the, let me just, can I give you a 1-second philosophy, how I approach town meetings? When I put together the list of articles, at the annual town meeting, I typically do all the financial articles first, and then I do zoning articles second. In specials, I typically go reverse, typically do the zoning articles and those kinds of bylaw changes first, and then I put the financial articles second. So Article 18 is a tree planting transfer of funds. It's something that we've done periodically over the years when monies need to be transferred from the watering fund account to the public highway shade tree account. They will actually need town meeting vote to do so, so it's time for that to happen. Last year, we created an ambulance stabilization fund. This meets our obligations under that and the next one.
This one we've had forever.
We've had that one for a long time.
Oh, we created the
It was
next
the-
one,
the
the fire.
vehicle one.
vehicle Stabilization
It's just
fund.
seeing if you're still paying attention.
It's late. We've had a
Paying
long day, I'm
attention.
sorry. OPEB trust fund, it's something that you folks have been very diligent on and something that is critically important in my opinion. So we're doing the right thing here. We've also carried forward an article for tax rate relief. We basically used $250,000 in free cash to lower the tax rate of the taxpayers in Sturbridge. We also are funding our capital stabilization fund to our fiscal policies to the tune of 159 this year, 159,000.
Is that a percentage of something? It's an odd number.
159, yeah, it's an odd number, yeah, but it's a percentage, it's sort of a rounded up,
I rounded it.
yeah.
Dollars and cents.
So can we get, or direct me to, I think last year we had a list of how much funds we had in the CPA and where things were spent, and then, you're talking about all these
But we usually
various
get that in the report.
stabilization funds in here as well.
Yes, of course.
It's just an,
Yep, easily
an idea
done.
of what the balances are.
Yep, easily done, we'll get that.
So usually you guys start seeing that when we start drafting the text boxes for you?
But yes, in the next few weeks, you'll be getting those things.
So the text box will say,
The
current balances
current
and will be as a
Yeah.
result. That's fine.
Article 24, we're using some free cash to do some other issues that are of importance here in the community. Data center upgrade at the public safety complex. We have one of the first things our new IT person will do is to coordinate this project. We have a massive amount of work that needs to be done over at the public safety complex that is, that needs to be accounted for in this year's operating budget. So we're going to be using free cash. It's a one-time expenditure, using one-time expenditures to fill one-time needs. Same thing with the next thing. This is a request from Burgess. They're looking for $150,000 for the purchase of wireless devices. These are like tablets for the schools. That was a request from the Sturbridge School Committee. Article 26, Ambulance Stabilization Fund Transfer. You will note that under our capital line, we are purchasing an ambulance, partially under capital, and the remaining portions coming out of our Ambulance Stabilization Fund. Does that make sense?
Yes. You will put in at some point that that's a two-thirds vote, I believe.
Yeah, we haven't gotten that far
You
yet.
haven't gotten that far, okay.
Wait a minute, I'm not sure that that is a two-thirds vote.
I thought it was coming out.
No. Well, I'll
I don't
verify
know. I
that.
thought it was.
Now I'm thinking about it. We call it a stabilization fund, so it would be. Revolving funds. Now, this is new. You may recall at the special town meeting in February, they changed the laws last year with the Municipal Modernization Act to effectively change what we do with revolving funds. So now we don't have to do, you wondered why this was so thin. Well, we don't have that 7 or 8 page revolving fund article anymore. We adopt it in our bylaws, so now it's permanently established in our bylaws, but we do have the requirement every year to set our annual funding limits. Article 27 sets the annual funding limits for the revolving funds. Yes, please.
So we have already created the Board of Health, Title
We
V?
haven't got there yet.
Okay,
No, that's in the
I'm
special.
coming there soon.
all right,
Hold that question.
all right.
Article 28 is, you've seen this a couple of times in the last several years, dissolvement of betterments. Basically, it's a housekeeping article that we have to do through town meeting to close out some betterment accounts that we have sitting on the books. Very minor issue. Do I have to talk about recreational marijuana? You guys can have a whole field day with that. I don't need to be bothering you with that tonight. False alarm bylaw, you've heard this about 1,000 times. Well, now we finally got it all straightened out.
Are you sure it's finally
Oh, yeah. I think
straightened
so.
out before we actually delve into it?
Yeah, we're good. It was reviewed by council, reviewed by the chiefs. Everything is in order. We have a minor special town meeting warrant.
Yeah.
Very small. We will have some snow and ice deficit. I know that because we have a snow and ice deficit. I'll
It's
tell you
still
what it is,
snowing.
but it keeps snowing. So I can't tell you, I can tell you what it is today, but who knows what it'll be by the time the town meeting's done. So I left it blank. It won't be blank for long. We'll eventually put a number in there. I know you guys don't like blank numbers in the town meeting warrant articles, so we will eventually put in a number shortly. Maybe next week.
It's a deficit.
We'll have a
It's a
deficit.
deficit,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. We didn't have a lot of feet of snow, but we had a lot of snow events, and that's where you start to get the real cost. Because if you have to bring out personnel to deal with an icing or a sanding exercise, you gotta bring out the whole team, you know, whether it's a quarter inch of ice or whether it's a foot of snow. You still have to bring out the whole team. So, so they have it down to a science. We used some material this year, some, you know, snow, salt and sand mix. Article 64 addresses your question, Mr. Serio,
Okay.
which is the creation of the revolving fund for, which basically amends the general bylaws that we adopted in February,
Right.
adding a new section for this. And we account for this in the annual town meeting article that we just talked about with the revolving fund.
Okay, thank you.
So for all these revolving funds, funds go in, funds come out. To the extent that there's more going in than coming out, does that money just stay in that account
Yes.
and accumulate?
Yes.
It can only stay. We have no authority over those funds.
So it never comes out and goes into the general
It
fund?
doesn't.
No.
No, theoretically, if you were to dissolve a revolving fund, the answer would be yes, I believe.
I'm sure.
The proper answer.
So,
would be
so why are we
yes.
treating the Title V inspection services through a revolving fund where similar type things where town employees getting paid for doing an inspection or service, such as the plumbing inspector and electrical inspectors, are treated as line items in the budget, and the fees that come from that go into the general fund, and then we pay them whatever? Why is this one being done in a different manner?
Well, it's not as parallel. There are some areas where it does parallel. Certainly, I would say that we did consult counsel on this item, and that was the recommended course of action from counsel. There is something that we have in Massachusetts called the Independent Contractors Law. And if you are operating as an independent contractor, a lot of communities fall in violation of the Independent Contractors Law. If you want to get to bed earlier, I can give you some reading material that will help facilitate that about the Independent Contractors Laws and how it affects the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That being said, it was based on the advice of counsel, the request of the Board of Health. And between Barbara and I, we felt it was the appropriate way to meet the request that was given to us by the Board of Health.
The other issue is that I know that there keeps being the comparison between the electrical and the plumbing inspector. The electrical and plumbing inspector receive a flat fee, an amount per inspection. Okay, so right now it's $40. Just so you know, the Board of Selectmen have not yet voted for Nelson is proposing $50. That has not been voted yet, okay? And then the fee increases have not been voted yet, though they have both been presented to the board. So in my opinion, there's a difference between number of inspections times $40 versus, depending on the inspection that's happening, a percentage of a fee.
An hourly wage.
You know, every fee, depending what the job is, the dollar amount changes. So that's not an hourly rate, that's not a salary, that's a fee-based person, which kind of makes more sense to come out of a revolving account.
So if the Board of Health decided to pay the agent a fixed fee and set that fee at 75% or whatever their fee was, but just said it, instead of paying you X percent of $300, I'm gonna pay you
$75, you mean?
$200 of that $300 and make it a fixed dollar amount.
But it's not, because it's like depending on what she's doing, the amount is different.
And we do pay other salaries out of revolving funds. It is an allowable use under the.
Excuse me, she referenced a third party that they're using an outside contractor in Charlton to do that.
Is that for the lake
It's,
testing?
Malley is doing their inspections for Title V and everything for the town of Charlton. We're talking about
Sorry, I
for
thought
the
it was.
Board of Health.
Okay.
All these inspections are done by an outside agency in Charlton, but all the fees are on their website, because I went and printed it out. And for simple stuff that we're talking about, that we talked about with her last week,
Right.
they show a list of fees, and it's $225 plus $75. $225 for the outfit that's doing the work, and 75 for the town. Now, they're able to figure out what it costs to do it, and whether they have to pay somebody for $225, and that's the answer we couldn't get the other night.
Right, but so the way it's been explained to me is the fee that she receives will be different based on what's being charged.
Their fees are all different based on what's involved in the
Yeah,
job.
but they're paying someone through a 1099 process, I would guess, in Charlton. That's not an
They're
employee.
paying an outside company to come in and do
Right.
that on their
Probably
behalf.
So they're outsourcing it.
And they have a fee schedule.
Well, we'll have a fee
Yeah,
schedule,
we'll have a
too.
fee schedule, too.
Right.
Now, when we
I
could,
understand that, but,
I don't want you to think for one second that Barbara and I are gonna have all the answers to your questions
I know,
about this.
but I'm looking at their fee schedule, and I'm saying, okay, it's $300 with $225 going to the company that's doing the work,
Yeah.
and $75 going to the town Board of Health. It specifies that, 75 to the Board of Health, $225 to
Sounds like their
them.
fees are more higher than ours fees are.
Their fees are, yeah, they are
Right.
higher.
Yeah.
But we're talking 90-10, and they're doing 75-25. And I guess my question is, as long as we're paying the person who's doing the inspections fairly and adequately, are we leaving money on the table that the town could have? Because we're only taking 10%. And the next question is, as we asked, 10% and 90% of what? Because we couldn't get a figure.
And since the
So-
independent contractor would
Just wasn't
presumably
getting the
be
information
liable
we
for their own liability insurance, it's counterintuitive that the rate split would be less in Charlton than it is here.
But that,
I'm not advocating to do what they do.
Yeah.
I'm advocating that we have to know what it costs to do this so that we can
Well, Lin-
adequately
yeah, so
compensate
Lin-
someone for doing the work.
Linda's supposed to be bringing you back more information,
Right.
right? So I guess.
right, I'm going to meet with,
It's fair to say that if you were to, I don't know who the liaison is to the,
I am,
or you got the short straw. So
yeah.
I think it's fair to say that, whatever questions that the Finance Committee has, I think, to be fair, you should probably relay those questions to Mike.
Right.
And have Mike, make sure that the Board of Health, because you don't, look, we have a little bit of
We voiced
time.
all the questions.
I think
She's
he
supposed
has
to come
all
back.
his-
I have all the, I have
I
all the
didn't watch
notes.
that meeting, so I did not,
Okay.
I wasn't.
I'm going to meet with them next week, so,
Mike, you got the short straw on a couple of things this week.
yeah, it's my lot in life, I
That's
guess.
because he's an experienced member and we have newer members.
It's a nice
so-
way of saying you're old.
So I did want to just
Right.
mention one thing,
Oh,
because I know this came
experience.
up when Board of Health was here. The benefit
it's right here.
costs, so that person would not be eligible for health insurance, vacation, that type of thing. But the person that will be in the position, we would have an expense for retirement for that person, because they are already a member of the retirement system, and so it doesn't matter that they wouldn't be a member here. Once a member, always a member, so we would be responsible for that cost.
And it's
And
a
that's-
function of pay.
No, it's part of that Worcester Regional Assessment that you saw. It would be factored into that annual
Of
assessment.
that big number, it would be some
But the
minuscule amount.
contribution on that person's behalf is based on their earnings, or?
So we don't contribute, yes, yes,
what I
but
meant.
we don't contribute, like, it's not like Social Security where it's the, seven, I don't even, is it 7.5?
7.65.
We don't have it, so sorry. But it's not that match of you pay it and then the town or the business pays the other half. This is, the employee pays their percentage, so whether it's 8%, 9%, whatever it is, okay? Because it differs by when you were hired. It's all, it doesn't matter. But anyway, we would see the effect of that when we get the annual assessment. That employee would be part of, if we listed out all the employees that were eligible for Worcester Regional Retirement, that person would be on the list. So the only reason I'm mentioning it, it's not a lot of money, but it was stated that there would be no benefits.
It's not technically correct.
Right, that's not technically correct. That is.
But we would,
The other part missing from that is, I take $100 in a fee, and I'm gonna pay you $90 to do or 90%, $90 for your service to review that or do the inspection. But there's more to, there's some payroll processing
For sure.
costs. There are some overhead costs associated with using facilities for whatever short period of time. So those were the pieces that, when they were talking about, we're gonna pay them 90%, and there's not really a whole lot of other overhead costs from the town for that position. I think they're undervaluing some of those other overhead costs.
I think-
and
Linda was concerned about overcharging the person getting the permit, more than the cost of actually doing the service, but I think, maybe we could it's hard to really calculate what the overhead rate is for the town, I would think, based on having done this for government contracts. It's a kind of a fuzzy, for something that's like a going entity that, I mean, how do you factor in the cost of heat and light and rent and, I mean, do people do that?
That way,
mean-
so we.
Right, so you're not, to allocate, it's like trying to figure out if you have a home office, like what cost of your house is allocated to your home business versus the rest of it. It's kind of fuzzy. But anyways, if we do it 75-25 or 90-10, whatever we decide, does all that money go into the revolving fund and then gets paid out of there, or does only the part that the town keeps go into the revolving
The
fund?
revolving fund language specifies what monies go in and what monies will come out. It has to be part of the bylaw.
Okay, but, so,
How does the town get their share? is
Right,
what
so,
he's
so even if we include the cost of these overheads we're talking
I
about,
see
and
what
it's,
you're
and it's in the fee, it's not coming out of that revolving fund to come back to the general fund to pay for the payroll processing costs
I
and
think
everything
that-
else,
I
right?
think that DOR has now ruled that you only have to put in the percentage you're paying out. So if 10% was meant to stay with the town, then that would be a general revenue.
That would be something
I
that the
will-
finance
I will-
department.
So then you'd only put in, into the revolving fund, the 90%.
right,
I will,
okay.
I will check that,
Okay.
because we haven't
Makes
had
sense.
this situation here, but I think.
So you only put in
that's-
what you, into the fund, what, the revolving fund, what you're gonna pay out
Right,
to somebody else, not to the,
right.
Which was the purpose for the revolving funds
Right.
in the first
Okay.
place.
You had talked about the contribution to the Worcester County retirement. So there's no social security contribution on that person's.
We're all
behalf.
prohibited.
No.
Every
She
municipal.
doesn't have to pay any.
Or
out of
Medicare.
her.
It would be
But there is
Medicare.
a
It would be Medicare,
Yeah.
not
which is the
social.
1.45, yeah.
But we have to match that?
We do.
And she has to pay that as well? Or is she treated as self-employed?
No, because she's an employee.
Okay, so we don't have, she'll take, that'll come out of her pay, she won't have to file it on her own.
Right, she'll get a W-2, not a
That's a pain in
1099.
the neck for an individual.
Right,
She was already an employee, that
she was the interim,
the possibility exists that it could be filled by a person who's not an employee in the future.
Right.
well, there's a legal opinion from council that it should be an employee, not a contractor.
Okay.
So, and on that, you mentioned that because she is already an employee, that would continue to accrue. So,
It's actually because she was a member of the retirement
she was a
system
member.
in another community.
Oh, I see.
so it follows
Yeah,
her.
It follows you, yes.
So say the person who's doing it now does not, what if that, like to Bruce's point, what if that person is not her? What if it's somebody else?
There would not be a retirement cost because
Then
they
there would
wouldn't be
not be.
eligible to contribute unless they were already a member
Okay.
prior to
From
coming here.
another,
Okay.
Yeah.
So
All right.
this position won't establish eligibility for the.
It does not.
For the county retirement?
No.
Okay, thank you.
but it would continue
It
eligible.
would continue
If it's
because
that person.
this.
Or another.
Or it could be
similar
if someone
person.
came from another community and took the
Who was-
job part-time here and was a
Okay.
member.
Yeah,
All right.
got it.
And why wouldn't we want a 1099? You said
Coun-
council
Council
doesn't
has
want
ruled
it?
that it's an employee, not a
Yeah.
consultant.
Why is that?
Well, I can share with you the opinion.
It's
I'll
probably
say-
the
I'll
amount
share
of
it.
control and stuff like that.
But
The
it's,
independent contractor rules essentially, not that I really want to go into the weeds that much, but
No, you-
essentially has much to do with control and oversight, right? So independent contractors, under the law, you're not allowed to dictate to them hours, you can't dictate to them how to do their job, when to do their job, where to do their job.
Okay.
Independent contractors are supposed to be completely independent, and what happens is that some municipalities this fall have violated this law and have gotten into actual trouble, which led to triple damages to the community for violating the independent contractors law. If you do it as an employee, there's considerable amount of oversight. You do, here's your schedule for the day, here is your conditions of employment, here are your, where you're going to work, what reports you're going to file, so on and so forth. So municipal government tries to stay away from independent contractors any way possible they possibly can, because it does lend to problems if there was some audits by the federal or state governments that, into our employment practices. Have we been misclassifying employment classifications for individual employees? there's huge damages that the town could be.
You don't have to continue because we actually did touch upon that, and you just kind of confirmed that, yes,
Yeah.
that's why we
We
can't
do
have
use them for
1099.
plowing though, right? Don't we use, we use independent
have-
contractors for plowing, right?
We have subcontractors for plowing, yeah.
Okay.
Leon, when Nelson was here, he mentioned that he was going to include in here a $100,000 article to allow him to take down some, or
We
give
had
him
a
the opportunity to take
presentation at
those
the Board
down.
of Selectmen's meeting, and it's possible that we'll have another article, but nothing has been approved by the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen meets on Tuesday. At that time, I'm expecting that they will finalize the articles and close the warrant. Does that mean that that article won't be added? No. Does it mean that it couldn't be added in the future before I post? No. We could have both of those things happen. I think that the Board of Selectmen is sufficiently concerned about Nelson's concern about abandoned buildings. The idea would be that we would use some number, whatever that number may be, 50, 60, 80, 100, who knows, from free cash to provide seed money for a building demolition project. We provide notice to abandoned buildings that are fire hazards, that are safety hazards, and we order them to be demolished. We give them, or the bank, whoever's in charge of those buildings, sufficient time to respond according to Mass General Law. They don't comply with the requirements of Mass General Law. We then have the ability, through proper notice and burning hoops that we have to jump through, to be able to take those buildings down at our expense and put a lien on the property for those, for that. Now, could that mean that we will get our money back?
Maybe.
Sometimes. Does that mean we could take a loss? Yes, it could. But it is one of those things that some communities do to make sure that we don't end up with burnt-out shell buildings on their main drags in town.
So at what point will the warrant be closed and no more changes in articles?
By the time I have to post it, which will be coming up shortly, before the end of the month. You'll have a final warrant within the next
2 or 3 a year.
couple weeks.
Okay. Anything else?
Can I just give you the answer? I think it's, if my phone didn't lose it, it's about 80%.
80%.
Residential is 80.9, and commercial is 12, industrial is 2.6, and then open space is less than 1%. Personal property is about 4.2%.
Wow, okay, thank you.
And that's better than a lot of communities around us. You know, even bigger sized communities than Sturbridge, 80% is a relatively low number for for what a residential percentage would be. And that means that we have a lot of commercial properties that are generating a decent amount of revenue for the town.
Thank you.
Not so much on the industrial side, but certainly on the commercial side. Did I keep you long enough?
Yes,
Yeah, but you guys have had short meetings since before tonight.
we have.
That's right.
Compared
we
to
have-
tonight, that's just pretty good.
I was hoping for that.
What?
A short
Oh, yeah, me too. Anyway,
It's a shame you didn't go through, sorry Kathy, it's a shame you didn't go through all that stuff about the 5-year, forecast and whatnot at the Saturday meeting, because that would have been very, very helpful then.
Well, I may do that next year. I mean, I did talk about revenues. You may all recall that I did talk about
You
what our
did.
revenues
You did.
are.
We took
But we
notes.
didn't talk about the concerns we have about excess levy capacity. And I
no,
do
you
think that moving forward, I think I am going to incorporate more of that in the Saturday.
Well,
meetings.
this is the finance committee, so those are important to, the finance people. It's important to me.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to try and communicate that, because we all know how that goes.
Hey, look, there are low-hanging fruit, right? We don't have to go into negative numbers on excess levy capacity. We could easily do away with the the tax rate article. I know we take the money from free cash,
No, don't do that.
but you know what I'm saying? I'm saying there are things that
Right.
we can do to
Yes,
kick
there's a
that
lot.
can down the street.
There's a lot of things.
Right? But, you know, are we going to be at a point where eventually, big things that we want to add to the budget, we need to do as debt exclusions or general overrides? And I think the answer, I think Barbara and I have made it clear that the answer to that question is yes. You know? Some communities do an override every 5 or 8 years or something like that, because they know the cost of health insurance does not go up 2.5%, right? We all know that. Health insurance was going to go up almost 11% this year. It's going to go up 7.5%. How do you sustain Proposition 2.5 when some of your expenses are rising at levels higher than 2.5%, right? We can't. It's unsustainable.
Well, individual households go through that same
You're
budget.
100% correct, yes.
And
Yep.
and you have the issue, you know, touching on schools is always touchy, but, you know, you have a very large school budget that, you know, if you look at it, percentage-wise, isn't going up a lot, but it's a very big number going up by that small percentage.
You're 100%
And that
correct.
chews a lot, and we have a much smaller amount of, you know, increase available to us each year. So that's tough. I mean, I know they're doing the best they can to control their costs and keep their increase over, to a small number, but it chews up a big part of that excess amount of money we have each year.
Yes, it does.
On the first page of the first tab, I give you the general increases for the operating budget. The proposed budget of $32.5 million is an increase of 3.2%. General government is roughly 2.7. Burgess is 2.9, and Tantascwa is 4.6. And I don't say that to throw stones, because that's not my intent. I think what we have here in the town is wonderful. Trust me, I'm envious of that. Those are the realities, right?
And what's important to note too is all the benefits for Burgess employees are under general government, because we include the unclassified under general government. We don't break things out by school side of the house and town side of the house. So the 4.9 is really more than 4.9, and the 2 is really less than 2.
Next year, I think I might divide those categories differently and say benefit cost is a separate category, perhaps. We're going to toy with it. We're going to tinker around with it.
All right, well, thank you for coming.
I'd say any time, but I don't want you to call me back.
Well, you might have to come back maybe one more time.
And so you are meeting on Tuesday?
Yes, but in
Yes,
conference room 2.
What are you planning to do?
Just, well, we have the senior center, but we'll just we'll probably vote everything,
Okay.
just about all the rest of the budget. We don't have the schools are coming to us on, they can't come till May 3rd.
So do you have a mobile cam we can put in there so you can watch us?
Oh, yeah, but that's probably what we'll do, at least. For the first part of the meeting, at least, we'll be voting on those budget items, and then we'll probably start tackling.
All right, but if anything comes up,
I can call you or text you, yeah.
because I'd rather deal with it quickly than,
Right,
it's just, I think it's easier, okay?
yes, all right.
Good night.
Good night.
Fine if you move her to.
So any old or new business all at once? The hour is late.
No meetings tomorrow.
Any public access?
Now, to Barbara's point, you know, we used to do 10 o'clock every time.
Oh, we did not.
We capped it at 10.
Oh, yeah, we did, oh, well, no, I thought you said we went to 10 every
No,
time.
previous to this
This is
year.
my first time over 10.
Oh, we've gone to 11.
We've got, oh, yeah, we have. And I think that's when we capped it at 10,
Yes.
didn't we?
Sounds like
Decide?
Spinal Tap.
Anyway, is there a motion to adjourn at 10:12
So
here?
moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Have a good weekend.
About the independent
So remember,
contractor thing.
Tuesday
I mean, I
is
went
the
through
conference
that.
room 2.
It's a little different.